And notable base tans, reports from the country's pools, lakes, and beaches have indicated that once again, the nation's Blakes coasted effortlessly through this year's seasonal lifeguard tryouts. Onion reporters spoke with Cincinnati Centennial Pool's manager, Charles Walker, about the exceptional performance of his Blakes.
We always see strong performances from Blakes, but this year's crop did especially well. Blake D did the 25-yard underwater swim in 86 seconds. Blake S and Blake C both carried subjects 40 yards without breaking a sweat.
In addition to qualifying as pool managers and certified aquatics instructors, the nation's Blakes significantly outshined the nation's stewards in swimming, performing CPR, diving, and glistening.
I'm definitely looking forward to being a lifeguard this summer. I heard the test was kind of hard, but it was actually kind of easy.
Our Kaylas are looking pretty strong too. As long as we have a few Blakes and Kaylas out there on the weekends, we'll be set.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
Welcome to Free Talk Live, another episode for you where you can take control of the airwaves should you wish to join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Bit of a different crew in the studio here tonight. We've got, is it fair to call you the Liberty Block Brothers?
Yeah, I guess you could. We've been called worse.
Yeah. Our normal Thursday night co-hosts have gracefully stepped away for this evening so we could have you guys in. I'm Ian Freeman as usual, but also joining us tonight, it's
Alu Axelman
and
Laser Axelman.
So listeners to the show certainly are familiar with you, Alu. You've called in a number of times. I'm pretty sure we've interviewed you from the Porcupine Freedom Festival in the past, maybe somewhere else as well. But you've been, I would say, an irregular caller to the show, talking about independence, secession, the Liberty Block. Of course, your website is thelibertyblock.com.
Just libertyblock.com.
Just Liberty. I'm so sorry about that. Libertyblock.com. What happens if you go to the Liberty? Does that even
I don't know.
Resolve to anything?
Sometimes when people look up the Liberty Block on Google, if it's not the first thing, they'll find like blockchain stuff and other Liberty stuff.
That's good to
which
be
is
with.
fine too.
Yeah.
Good enough.
But I don't think our listeners probably know you, Laser, so you're pretty new to the Free Talk Live listening audience. From what I understand, you've spent some time in Ukraine recently?
Yeah, so I just got back a very short while ago. I just got back to the United States last week.
Wow.
Been out in Ukraine for most of the last year and a half, a little bit more than that.
And as I understand it, you are doing like health-related stuff? Are you an EMT like Alu, or what is it?
Yeah, so Alu and I actually went to paramedic school together, so we've been doing that for a good while together now. And I was doing that out there. I was attached to a medical team attached to the diplomatic monitoring mission that's been going on there since 2014.
The diplomatic monitoring mission. What is that, and whose mission is it?
There's an organization called the OSCE, which is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Think of them...
Is this the EU?
It's not EU, it's not UN, but largely in some functions, they essentially do the same kind of work. So it's a 57-nation conglomerate that dates back to the 1970s. It's had several names since then. The United States is a founding member, among others. Until recently, Russia and Belarus were also members before being formally kicked out of the coalition. But they essentially have monitoring missions anywhere in one of their member states if there's any type of war. So at various points, they've had missions, large-scale missions in places like Georgia, Kosovo, and the Balkan states, things like that. They still have small offices monitoring things in Moldova and Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all over the place, wherever they're involved. So it's similar to EU-style and UN missions in a lot of regards.
So what do they monitor?
So essentially what they were doing out there is monitoring the actual conflict that's been going on since 2014. It's been hot and cold. It was hotter, and then it was colder until obviously very recently when it became a full-scale war again.
Mm-hmm.
They went out there relatively early in 2014, and essentially it was a lot of documenting kind of what's actually happening on the ground. They've had teams since the beginning on both sides of what's referred to as the contact line, essentially what's formally held by the Ukrainian government versus what's held by the breakaway states in the east.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've had teams on both sides, and kind of their job is to primarily observe and report. They also have a mediating function where to get things done, they'll have both sides sit down and go, hey, for example, this town has had no water in 6 days because of shelling. If you guys could just sit down, calm down, give us what they call a window of silence for X amount of time or over X amount of days so that we can come in and get these people some electricity and water back. That'd be great. And then go back to doing what you were doing. There's also some of what they call human dimension, which is essentially humanitarian type observe and report work. So finding out what's actually happening on the ground, what these social situations are like, things like electricity, water supply, food supplies, and things of this sort. So kind of a mix of normal diplomatic missions plus some humanitarian type missions from a at least theoretically non-biased standpoint on both sides. So kind of reporting whatever they see, no matter who fires what shell. They simply go back and say, hey, we saw a shell come from this direction or that direction at these coordinates, and that's that. And then every single day since the beginning of the mission, they publish a complete report on all their findings for the last 24 hours on their website.
Every day?
Every day.
And what is their website?
I believe it's just osce.org, but I could be wrong about the .org part.
And you worked for the OSCE?
So I work for a contractor that provides the medical support to the OSCE mission.
Okay, and how long were you there?
I was there since July of 2020.
And you just left just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well, you've been back. You've had a few breaks, right?
Yeah, I've had breaks. I've been on leave, and I have a pretty generous schedule, so I've come and gone numerous times. But the mission was temporarily suspended when all of this broke out. So within a few days, they evacuated all of us. Every single member got out safely. That was the end of that. We evacuated from the Western teams, evacuated into Moldova and Romania. The teams in the very, very far east evacuated into Russia without any issue. And then the Russian teams were evacuated to Turkey, and the Western teams were evacuated to Vienna, and everybody went home.
How did you get evacuated?
We had armored cars. We have diplomatic vehicles. So we just got in a convoy of our own vehicles and drove across the country.
Getting through the border?
No, not really. I mean, we
had some interesting things during the convoy, but
yeah, there were interesting things. I mean, it was. We drove for 2 straight days through the night and just rotated drivers and kept going. But we all got out safe.
Wow.
And then I hung out in Europe for 10 days because I felt like I earned a vacation. So.
Okay, and now you're back here in the
Now I'm back.
in the States. You guys are brothers. Are you the older of the two?
I am, by about a year and a half.
Okay. So if you guys want to join us here, whether you want to talk about Ukraine or whatever, I know we're probably going to get into secession because when you walked through the door of the studio, which by the way is your first time in Keene, right, for anything?
Yeah, I came to Keene to visit with my wife a few years ago.
Long time ago?
Yeah,
Okay.
years ago.
But first time in the studio.
Yeah, first time here. And you heard us from down the block, right?
Just about. And I said, are you guys always like this? Because y'all were not even stopping talking constantly. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be hard on the air. But you've been good so far.
No,
so
we can behave.
We are professionals.
We'll see how this goes. But I guess more questions about Ukraine since, you were actually there. And it's so hard to look at the different reports from the different sides and believe anything.
I fully agree with you.
Even you don't know who to believe, or do you
even
have
I
any
don't know.
sources?
You were there.
I was there. I can say the things that I saw. Of course, we were out in the first few days, and so anything that's happened in the last few weeks, I couldn't give you a first-hand account. The best I could give you is second-hand accounts from friends that I still have in various parts of the country. Other than that, I have access to at least a little bit of stuff that most Americans probably don't, not through any official channels, but just because of my local friends. I have, for example, Telegram has been a wealth of information. Is any of it trustworthy? No. But is it information? Sure. So over there I have both Russian and Ukrainian channels, and I've come across more than one video where one will claim, hey, we just blew up this Russian convoy, and then the same videos in the Russian channel it goes, hey, we just blew up this Ukrainian convoy. I'm like, that's the same 40-second clip, guys. You guys drive the same tanks, fly the same helicopters, have most of the same equipment. It's very hard to tell. It's not like it's two teams wearing different color uniforms and you go, oh, this is from here and this is from there. They literally use almost entirely all the same equipment.
Do you speak either Ukrainian or Russian?
So where I lived in the very far east, the day-to-day functional language is Russian.
Okay.
All schools are in Ukrainian, radios in Ukrainian, things like that. But if you're out on the street, everybody speaks Russian. People at home speak Russian.
So you were in the eastern
I was in
Donbass
I was
province?
in the Donetsk Oblast.
Okay.
So you can speak Russian now.
I speak a
conversationally.
functional but ugly Russian. It's
Okay.
enough to get me around pretty comfortably.
Did you learn any of it before you went there?
I
or-
think I knew 12 words, 6 of which I can't repeat on the radio.
Okay. So you picked it up just by being immersed in it, or did you actually start doing like a Russian class or like a,
I did a lot of work. It's a hard language. It's
I bet.
admittedly a much more complex language than I realized. The grammar is incredibly complex, pretty once you figure it out, which I haven't. But No, I had books, applications, a lot of conversations with our translator team, a lot of conversation with Russian speaking colleagues, and then just putting myself in it. So a little bit of immersion, reading, listening, watching.
All of the above.
Yeah,
okay.
Everything I could.
And so you're the OSCE, this diplomatic monitoring mission, I think you called it.
Yeah.
Is that right? They've been out there since 2014.
Yeah.
Did they go out after the Donbass areas declared independence?
I could not tell you exactly the date they went out. I wasn't there, but they were involved very, very early in the conflict. They had a team out there.
We're going to talk more about it coming up here. If you've got some questions for somebody who is actually in Ukraine, because we don't hear from those people too often, although we have had a few callers over the last few weeks. The number 603-283-6160. We got Alu and Laser in the studio here with us tonight, guys from LibertyBlock.com. You can join us here as well and bring up whatever's on your mind. This is Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
Brute force, intransigent defiance, adamantine will. These are the hallmarks of the AI tank. These gigantic machines have the firepower of an army, but they also have their own sense of honor and duty. When the world breakers arrive, battle will be joined, planets will shake, and war and peace will never be the same again. World Breakers. Stories from David Weber, Larry Correia, and more. Available August 3rd from BaneBooks.com.
I'm a little obsessed with My Magic Mud. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, the founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I didn't even know my teeth were coffee stained. A week's worth of use convinced me, and now I use it every 3 or 4 days. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, and I think it cleans better, too. My Magic Mud's available at most local health food stores, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, CVS, Walmart's Natural Beauty Aisle, but I can get it for you for 20% off with coupon code FTL20 at mymagicmud.com. FTL20 mymagicmud.com.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
There are basically 2 types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio is great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. Phones are open here. If you want to join the show, you can. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Different crew in the studio here tonight. You've got Ian, Laser, and Alu. Laser and Alu are from the Liberty Block, and you can go to libertyblock.com. Now, Laser, do you actually blog over at Liberty Block?
I do from time to time.
Okay.
I used to be a lot more involved. It all spawned off a radio show that we had in Connecticut, an AM radio show, and that's what led to the Liberty Block, and then we kind of just put recordings of the shows on the website, and then as we both moved out of the tri-state area and could no longer maintain that, it became a website that spawned into its own little media outlet and then grew from there.
See, I didn't know the history of...
Originally on 1490 AM.
Where?
WGCH. It's
Greenwich, Connecticut.
What was it?
Connecticut.
What station?
1490 WGCH.
BCH.
WGCH.
GCH. Okay, very good. Was that one of the ones where you pay for airtime, or did they give you?
Yeah, so we paid for like a 10-week block, and we got on a tiny bit of little advertisers or live reads and affiliates and stuff. And it was just a 1-hour show. We said whatever we wanted on Wednesdays, like Wednesday or Tuesday afternoon for like an hour. It was pretty good, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock hour.
Was it just the two of you, or was your dad involved with it?
It was mostly me.
Generally,
I brought him on as a co-host a few times. I brought on my dad once, I think, and a few other co-hosts, and we interviewed like Larry Sharp and some other libertarians. So we interviewed plenty of guys too.
Now, wait, aren't you guys originally from New York?
Heavens no, thankfully.
Well, we were in New York for 10 years. So when we were doing this, we drove to Greenwich for the studio. It was a few minutes away.
Okay.
So yeah, we were there for most of our adult lives in New York.
In the city,
yeah,
right?
in Queens.
Decade in New York.
So we drove from Queens right over through the Bronx to Greenwich. It was like a border city. And we did this show for a few months. And then I didn't renew it. I was moving here in 2017, so I moved here. So I didn't renew it back in Connecticut. But yeah, it started as a radio show. I made libertyblock.com to host the audio from the shows, the MP3. And then I started supplementing with blogging, and I started realizing I like writing about how terrible de Blasio is and New York City government. I just loved de Blasio and Cuomo gave me so much ammunition.
No shortage of content.
And they were the ones who radicalized me from conservative to libertarian to voluntarist.
Thanks.
So
I usually take credit for that, but fine, de Blasio.
Well, you were there. You were there too, but mostly de Blasio. So I wrote articles, and then once I moved here, I was doing articles, and I kept it going with the podcast, not radio, but podcast and videos. And I kept writing articles, and I realized I like articles as much or more than I like doing audio. I still love both to this day. I love writing. I love doing, speaking, podcast, videos. So now the Liberty Block is still, kind of half articles and half a big podcast video segment of the site, and a lot of articles as well. So we still do both, but now we don't write about New York. We write about local stuff in New Hampshire where it matters, and we can get wins for liberty.
So are you kind of like, when you're not traveling the world doing this various medical missions that you're on, Laser, are you based in New Hampshire now?
Loosely, sort of, kind of, yes. The last time I had a normal domicile, if you will, is Wyoming, and that was over 2 years ago already. And since then, I've done work
in a bunch of
different states,
just a cowboy.
Overseas. So, I mean, I live where my company's put me, or in whatever hotel they put me in.
I gotcha.
It's been an interesting couple of years.
Yeah, I bet. So we were talking about your experience in Ukraine. You're there for the OCSE, which I forgot what that stands for.
OSCE, yeah.
OSCE, thank you. And you were a contractor for them. They're there monitoring the situation, basically, after 2014 in Ukraine.
Yep.
And for listeners that maybe aren't familiar, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong about, from your understanding of what happened. You've got these two, let's call them states. That's probably the easiest way to relate them. These sections of Ukraine called the Donbass province, I think, or something like that.
So,
there's Luhansk and Donetsk. Is that right?
Yeah, so Donbass is sort of a region.
A region, okay.
It's actually sort of a, I forget the word I'm looking for, but when you just squish two words together, it's the Donetsk Basin, and essentially it's massively significant because of the natural resources there. It's the primary source of natural resources in Ukraine in terms of things like coal and other sort of mines, minerals, things like that. So in the Soviet days, it was a massively industrial area. Cities like Mariupol, which is now all over the news. Mariupol has horrible problems with the air quality over there is just horrifically bad. So is the water quality in the Sea of Azov. And much of the reason for that is all of the plants and factories. There's a factory on the edge of Mariupol that is, from what I've been told, 6 kilometers long.
Jeez.
I know that when you drive by it, it takes 15 minutes. It's the largest facility of any kind I've ever seen.
And what do they
it's
make
some
there?
kind of steelworks or ironworks, by my understanding, but it's been standing for decades.
Wow.
It's still partially operational. It's not running at full scale like it was back in the Soviet days, but it's a massively industrial area, and that's primarily the reason for its importance in terms of what it naturally does offer, is it's the industrial piece of Ukraine, essentially.
Supposedly, there's a lot of people there that speak Russian and want their independence from Ukraine. So there were some ballot measures, I guess, that they created. There was an independence movement. They declared independence. They voted supposedly for independence. Of course, the other side says the vote was a sham. And that
sounds familiar.
Yeah, and so it's hard to really know. Obviously, you weren't there for it. Did you hear anything from people about whether or not they do want to be part of Russia or independent from Ukraine? Because they did say they're independent. They didn't join quote-unquote Russia. They're supposedly independent republics now.
So it does depend who you ask, and I feel like it's not any different in most other countries where things like this happen, whether on larger or smaller scales. If you ask some people, they 100% want to be part of Russia. If you ask some people, they 100% want independence. And if you ask other people, it's the tiniest percentage of people who wanted to be in any way independent or Russian affiliated, who really just dragged all of the proud Ukrainians along with them. It really depends who you stop and ask on the street. I can say that in Donetsk, right in the center of the city, there's a gigantic, I'm not really sure how to describe it. It's sort of like a welcome sign. When you enter a city, there will be a big sign, welcome to wherever. There's a huge I love Russia sign right in the heart of the city of Donetsk. There are Soviet flags that still hang in Donetsk and Russian flags that hang in Donetsk. The Lenin statue still stands in like right around the center of the town.
Yuck.
There's definitely some percentage of people there that have some degree of Russian allegiance, and or even if it's not modern, some historical Soviet / previously Russian ancestry allegiance. I don't quite know, and it's just hard to say because who really knows?
Yeah.
But there's at least some degree of significant movement there for either independence or some degree of affiliation with Russia.
But it's hard to know if it's even a majority.
It's so hard to know because who knows? And like you said early on, there's so much propaganda in every direction that trying to weed out what's factually based, is it 10% who want that or is it 90? Who knows? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Because that's the excuse, or one of the excuses that Putin used for the invasion was he's saying, hey, these people declared independence. I'm just here to back them up. We're going to, Russia's going to recognize these countries as independent republics. And he says that there have been attacks against the people of these areas by the rest of Ukraine, which he claims is run by Nazis. He wants to denazify, as he says, and demilitarize the rest of Ukraine. You were talking about shellings earlier in the area. So is that a real thing? Were the people in Donbass, in Luhansk and Donetsk being attacked by elsewhere in Ukraine?
From both sides. There have been times where it's ice cold. There have been times where it heats up a little bit. There's been some degree of activity back and forth pretty much nonstop since 2014.
And we say activity, you mean violence?
So the Ukrainian government has been attacking Lugansk and Donetsk for being independent?
Yeah, and the question, obviously it all depends who you ask who shot first, but there have been shells flying across both directions over the course of the last 8 years.
Really?
There have been random machine guns across. Every now and then, one side will claim, hey, a sniper from the other side took out one of our guys. So who knows?
The number here, if you want to join the show, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. It's interesting having the perspective from someone who's been there for the last couple of years, and you don't really know that much more than anybody else.
It's all a mystery, my friend.
What is the truth? Well, if you got an opinion, you can share it with us here. 603-283-6160. I know one thing's for sure. RT.com's being blocked all over the place. Why is that? Free Talk Live's video archives have been on LBRY for years. LBRY is an uncensorable, decentralized, blockchain-based media sharing protocol, and we're big fans of it here on Free Talk Live. In 2020, LBRY launched Odyssey, a video sharing website to compete with YouTube, and it's really taking off. Now with over 1 million channels, many of whom are disaffected YouTube creators. During YouTube's crackdown for not towing the government line on COVID, the Free Talk Live YouTube channel started receiving strikes and could be completely taken down at any moment. thankfully, Odyssey started offering live streaming, so we're now streaming live every night and posting our video archives permanently to Odyssey. You can watch live or anytime on our Odyssey channel by visiting video.freetalklive.com. If you want to go all in, download the desktop app at lbry.com, and then every video archive you watch, you'll help seed and keep it online forever. At minimum, we ask you visit video.freetalklive.com and follow us on Odyssey today. video.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US President Joe Biden says he supports the idea of expelling Russia from the G20 as punishment for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The president has been attending meetings in Brussels with Nato, the G20 and the European Council, during which he announced new American sanctions against Russia. And NATO as a whole pledged more military support for Ukraine, as reporter Linda Kennedy explains from Brussels.
NATO is going to give anti-tank missiles and drones to Ukraine. It's going to supply support or equipment that can defend against biological, chemical and nuclear attacks. The announcement is there's going to be $1 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and the US is going to accept 100,000 Ukrainian refugees.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told reporters that NATO is determined to continue sending weaponry to help Ukraine and additional forces to the alliance's eastern flank.
We will work with like-minded allies to ramp up lethal aid to Ukraine at scale, providing kit to President Zelensky in the quantity and with the quality that he needs to defend his country from its bullying neighbour.
Speaking to reporters, President Biden was asked if Russia uses chemical weapons in Ukraine, will NATO respond?
It would trigger a response in kind. Whether or not you're asking whether NATO would cross, we'd make that decision at the time.
On Friday, President Biden heads to Poland, and he's hinted at a possible trip to Ukraine, although held back from disclosing the details. In Moscow, 33 companies have resumed trading on the Moscow Exchange for the first time in a month after the stock market closed to prevent a massive sell-off, as FSN's Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Banks, oil companies, fertilizer and nickel exporters all did well when trading resumed, but the exchange and central bank have taken extreme precautions to ensure a stable return to operations. Not all companies were allowed to resume trading, short selling was banned, some companies are thought to have bought back shares, and Russia's National Wealth Fund has been ordered to invest up to $9 billion in Russia's biggest companies over the year to soften the blow.
The United Nations has condemned North Korea's test of a banned intercontinental ballistic missile, as FSN's Sarah Walton reports from UNHQ in New York.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the missile strike was another break of a moratorium on launches of this nature that was announced by North Korea itself. And he said it was a clear violation of Security Council resolutions. Guterres urged North Korea to desist from taking further counterproductive actions and pledged to work with all parties to establish peace and denuclearize the Korean peninsula. Sarah Walton, New York.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open here if you want to join us. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by Bitcoin.com. You go to Bitcoin.com and you can learn the basics about cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. All you have to do is click Get Started at the top of the page there, and then you'll find some introductory videos. If you only have 3 minutes, just watch the first one. If you got a little more time, maybe you'll want to dig in a little bit deeper, and they can help you with that there. You'll get some of the basics down, like, what's decentralization? Why does that matter? What is, the blockchain? Get some basic explanations so you can grasp some new concepts, which are important to understand if you're going to get into the world of crypto. You don't want to go into it blind, that's for sure. Go to Bitcoin.com, click Get Started, and get started today. Also, if you're not new to cryptocurrency, you want to get the latest news headlines, they've got those for you over at news.bitcoin.com. Again, that's news.bitcoin.com. Joining you in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
Laser.
and Alu.
You guys are from LibertyBlock.com. We've been talking about Laser's experience in Ukraine. You were there for the last couple of years, just got out, basically, a couple days after the shooting started?
Yeah, I think we technically crossed the border out about 3 days in.
Do you think it's true that what Putin is claiming, that he's only there to attack military targets and he's not there to, go after the civilians?
So it really did look like that on day one. And I can tell you, we woke up, everyone in my whole town will always remember, we woke up at exactly 4:57 in the morning when a ballistic missile hit the airport. It turns out they're very loud. So there was a second one that followed, and about an hour of fighting back and forth. Rumor has it a jet was shot down. Who knows? Then there was a third ballistic missile. It was already dawn, so we watched that one fly directly overhead. I think it hit the fuel supply at the airport because the whole sky turned orange for a moment.
Wow.
So it was an interesting start, but following the news as it unraveled that day, it seemed like at least 10 airports around the country had been hit from east to west, north to south. It was precision strikes. They took out airports. They took out munitions depots. They took out military equipment factories. They hit a couple Army bases, training facilities, things like that. It looked to be precise, quick, clean, accurate, pointed very specifically at strategic targets. And it looked that way throughout the first day. The second day, it started to get a little bit different. Now, at this point, who knows what the targets actually are, but it is definitely no longer concentrated on military facilities and strategic places.
Yeah, there was something on RT.com, which, of course, is Russia Today, and that is the government-funded news network from the Russian government. And obviously, it's propaganda. You do have to take it with a grain of salt, but that's also true of the Western media, so you have no idea, what the truth is. But it's interesting that RT is being banned in so many different places. You mentioned this off the air, Alu, that the channel has been banned by governments in Australia, in the European Union, Canada as well. So basically all of the Western governments, with the exception of the United States and maybe Mexico, have banned this content. I think that's very interesting because you get the other side of the story. So just the other day there was a story at RT about, well, what about the missile that struck the shopping mall? Here's the Russian side of the story, because apparently that's what the mainstream media was reporting on. Oh my God, the missile struck a shopping mall. Well, apparently the mall was empty. It was an old mall or something like that, and there were allegedly missile launchers that had been moved into the parking lot of that mall. So it's interesting just kind of reading the different sides to this. That's why we struck this mall, because they were using it as a cover for their missile launchers.
And I think that's always the way it is in any conflict: is everybody lies and the truth is loosely, vaguely somewhere in the middle. Generally. Who knows with this one? I don't know which shopping mall you're referring to. I do know there was one relatively brand new shopping mall in Kiev, and this one I know more firsthand because I have a friend who lived 5 minutes from there, and it wasn't that shopping mall was a functional shopping mall where my friend used to go to the movies, and it is now completely, it was hit directly.
Wow.
I saw an after photo. It's a carcass of a building. It's wild. One strike, perfectly accurate, obliterated the entire thing. So I don't know if there's another mall in question here, but that's at least one mall. And I got that information from my friend who lived 5 minutes away.
Yeah, I was
now in
say,
Poland.
What have you been hearing from the people? Because obviously you got out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But you said you know people there, right? So what are you hearing from them?
So in the town that I live in, I still have a good decent number of friends who are on the ground in town. I also am part of a couple Telegram channels that are local news for the town. Anything just update for the town. They predate all of this war. It's just been town news, if you will. And part of the things that they now include are when the air raid sirens go on and off. So I get notifications every time those things go on and off, and it's been anywhere between 5 and 20 times a day, and it'll last anywhere from 2 minutes to an hour. And whenever that happens, I'll reach out to some of my friends on the ground and go, hey, what's actually happening? Is this just a siren? Are you hearing explosions? Are you seeing things? It's been a mix. Sometimes it's just sirens. Sometimes there are explosions. Sometimes they're far. Sometimes they're close. A building about 3 minutes walk from me, right behind the supermarket I used to go to, did get hit. At least one person died. I saw photos that my friend took on the ground who lives in the building next door to that one. So there is there are munitions hitting towns and hitting civilian areas, and that's what I'm getting. Most of my friends, thankfully, have actually gotten out and are now spread all over Europe as far as Dublin. But I do still have friends on the ground in a couple very small towns in the east, in Kramatorsk, where I was, in Kiev, and toward the west in Lviv and Ivano-Frankivsk. Probably a couple other places that I'm not thinking of.
When you say your friends have gotten out, are they all female, or are there men who've been able to leave? Because we heard early on that they were locking down the border for any men under the age of 60, basically.
So that is true. Most of the friends that I have who've gotten out are female. I know of one or two who are male, but I could not tell you how they got out. I don't know if they had some special thing. I don't know if maybe they were prior service and had an injury, so they got some sort of an exemption. I don't know if they have medical exemptions. I have no idea. I know of 2 or 3 guys who have gotten out who are in their 30s. They went out through regular channels, through regular checkpoints, so they must have something in place that allowed that. However, overall, yes, a Ukrainian citizen, the male citizens between 18 and 60 have not been allowed to leave the country by and large. That is an official, actual rule that's been laid down. I've also heard stories, though I cannot confirm it, that the same has been put into effect for permanent residents who are not citizens. I can't confirm that, but it's stuff I've heard through the grapevine.
Now, that obviously seems like a step one towards a military draft. Do you know if that's also happening, a draft at this point?
I have no idea. I would agree that does seem to be tipping in that direction, but I haven't heard anything about that, and I don't know how really they would implement it in the midst of all this. I think when all the dust settles from this, is that something that could be in the pipeline in the future? I would say that seems reasonable. I would say it's a good guess, but I haven't heard anything about it yet.
So it looks like the shopping mall was in Kyiv. The story from RT.com, the Russian Defense Ministry has released a video which it claims shows Ukrainian rocket artillery for which civilian buildings had been used as a cover before it was hidden inside a Kyiv shopping mall. The site was destroyed overnight in a missile strike, which the Ukrainian authorities described as an indiscriminate bombing of a civilian target. The Major General Igor Konashkinov said on March 21st, during the night, a high-precision long-distance weapon was used to destroy a battery of Ukrainian multiple rocket launcher artillery and the base where they stored ammunition in a defunct shopping center. Now, you described this as a brand new mall?
It's very possible there were totally things hidden in that shopping center. I have no idea. I just know it was there and now it's not.
Yeah.
And per my friend who lived about 5 minutes away, this is toward the west of Kyiv, and she said she used to get her nails done in that shopping center and go to the movies. So I know it's functional. Maybe it's half functional, but I know it is a functional shopping center.
Well, not anymore, apparently.
Right. Now it is nothing. It's rubble.
Well, yeah, and that's one of those things that it's definitely a strategy, right, to use the civilians as a cover.
It is.
Even hospitals. We've seen with other wars. I think some Islamic terrorists have done this. Go set up in a hospital, use them as even targets, or set it up as their home base. Either take over the hospital and get the patients out, or also residential houses. They'll go to a house and kind of commandeer it, like a Third Amendment type thing of quartering in the house.
Absolutely.
And then once you bomb the hospital or the house, they say, "Look at these evil opponents." Yep.
And I'm not saying the Russians aren't monsters. They are bad, oppressive people as well. These are two very oppressive
All governments
nations. Yeah. These are not the freest of the nations on the planet. That is for sure. And even the so-called freest countries are full of a bunch of tyrants.
Less free than you think.
Yeah, exactly. The number 603-283-6160, but yet the people in the West are trying to position Zelensky and the Ukrainians as freedom fighters, and it's ridiculous. There's more coming up. The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
This is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends. I've run websites since 1996 and have used over a dozen web hosts in that time. AgristHosting.com is the only one that hasn't broken my heart. Agrist Hosting's uptime and service is stellar, and their DDoS mitigation is the best I've seen. That's important because if you tell the truth in this world, you'll ruffle feathers. And some people will try dirty tricks to silence your voice. No matter what the haters hit us with, Agrist Hosting keeps our websites online. If you have a mission-critical commercial presence or a world-changing activism site, you cannot tolerate any skullduggery. So go with agristhosting.com. Have a WordPress or blog site, but you're not satisfied with performance or uptime? Or just want raw hosting? Want to pay with Bitcoin? Agrist Hosting specializes in high-performance hosting with personalized service. Go to agristhosting.com and click on the button that says Get Hosted. That's agristhosting.com.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open if you want to join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And you can bring up anything that you want, although right now we've got a guy in the studio, Laser, from LibertyBlock.com. Also, his brother Alu, who has not spent time in Ukraine, so you haven't been doing as much talking here in this episode so far. We're going to get into it because you guys actually disagree on things, and we're going to get into that.
Yes, we do. We stormed into the house fighting viciously.
So that's coming up. But still just kind of getting your input on the time that you spent in Ukraine, and of course you still know people who are there, and we're going to continue that discussion here. But again, the number is 603-283-6160. So we were actually just talking about during the break that your statement about the people in Ukraine, or at least in the areas that you were spending time, just don't care about what the laws say. And one of the things you were mentioning a little while back, not on the air, there's like speakeasies that are in operation there right now due to the curfews and due to the various restrictions that are in place. I think didn't they just recently declare martial law or something like that in Ukraine?
So since the conflict began, my understanding is they have. That was after I left, so I can't speak to any of that. I can speak during the COVID restrictions, and this was all across the country, and I ran into it, and a lot of friends were telling me about places they were going in various cities, east to west. But during the lockdowns, there were a lot of places that simply remained open behind black curtains. And it seemed to be a theme, and all of my Ukrainian friends didn't really react about it as if that was totally a normal thing. And it just seems to, I don't know if it's some kind of a holdover from feeling like they recently got out from under the oppression of the Soviets and therefore they have no time for laws or government. But by and large, all of the Ukrainian people I met in my time there, they're not running around acting crazy, but they don't seem to have much regard for whatever's a law on paper.
Give me some examples.
I like the speakeasies during all the COVID lockdowns or all the COVID rules that came through, whether it was masks, closing restaurants, and...
So the national Ukrainian government was issuing the standard COVID crackdown kind of rules,
at
like
points.
everywhere.
It was never quite as bad as most Western countries. For example, they divided the country into regions, and then a region could be various color codes, and if you were a red region, then at that point you would have these restrictions in place, such as no dine-in indoors at restaurants and things like that. So,
but people were still
But
doing
the restaurants that could find a way around it, such as restaurants that had a second story or a basement, by and large would shut down the floor that's visible from the street. And if you knew how to get in, if you knew the right phone number, if you knew the right knock, if you knew the right person, if you knew what number to send a text message to, places remained open.
Wow.
Even in Kiev.
And you were there for this. You lived through
Yeah,
this.
I would be hanging out with a local friend who'd say, let's get dinner. And I would say, well, everything's closed. And they're like, no, it's not.
You got to know the right people.
I met the right people. I would never have found these places on my own. They were relatively enough well hidden from the street view, but there were certainly open places across the country.
And busy, right? Like when you went in there?
Normally, yeah.
Normally busy.
People would just, once you were indoors, you'd never realize there were any sort of rules in place. It was business as usual on the inside.
And if they didn't follow all the mask and vaccine mandates, I assume everyone in Ukraine is dead now.
Well, obviously, that's the only way this could have gone.
As I understand it, the official numbers for Ukraine as far as vaccination are very low, right? 30s percentile.
I have no idea. I would assume very low. I couldn't give you a number because I was too busy not caring.
Yeah.
So, don't know.
What else have I not asked you about that you want to tell us about your experience there? Because obviously you've experienced a lot in 2 years. So
yeah, it was an interesting time. Honestly, I loved it, and I feel that while it ended interestingly for the moment, and the work that we're doing is technically suspended. It's not over, and who knows if this war lasts another week or another year. I don't think anyone can state conclusively they know. I thought I had a lot of knowledge about what was going to ensue when this all began. I've been proven wrong so many times that I've stopped attempting to guess at what happens next. So we're all just sitting and waiting in a holding pattern. At some point, presumably, this will end, and we will all go back to what we were doing. But it's been a great place for the last couple of years because, by and large, it has averted the unbelievably crushing weight of COVID edicts that spread throughout primarily Western countries and Far Eastern countries. So while most of the states in the United States were almost entirely locked down, while all restaurants were closed, while businesses were collapsing left and right, while nobody was allowed to attend school, while you had to wear masks in some states, even outdoors, even by yourself, in Ukraine, by and large, we avoided all of that. Perhaps part of it has to do with the fact that it's not EU. So when one EU state said jump, all the others had to say how high. And Ukraine said, we don't speak French, so whatever you're saying, we don't care.
Okay.
Maybe it's because since it's not EU, travel into Ukraine is a little bit more difficult for people from the EU. They can't just drive across the border, so there was less tourism, so maybe it spread less. But for the vast majority of my time there, Ukrainian life remained pretty much normal, pretty much free. Things stayed open. Everybody was out in the streets. So you had to put on a mask to ride the bus. Half the people did, half the people didn't, but officially you had to.
Is that because it's a government bus?
Because it's a government bus. Or on a train, you had to wear a mask, but then they said if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask, and then they changed it. But even at its worst, the COVID-related issues that people were dealing with in all of the Western world barely existed relative to the United States or to the UK, to Israel, to anywhere in the EU, to any of the Eastern countries like Korea or China. It was a very free life for 2 years. And more than once, I found myself thinking, wow, I just went and visited everyone in the United States. And outside of states like New Hampshire, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Florida, I ran into so many problems, and everyone wants to see my vaccine card and this and that. And then I go back to Ukraine. As soon as I walk out of the airport, it's life as usual.
Wow.
And it was funny to me that I'm in a country that sits right around the median income in terms of the world. To the Western world, Ukraine's a relatively poor state.
Mm-hmm.
Globally, it's almost exactly in the middle. But coming from the United States, it's a relatively poor country.
Sure.
It's a post-Soviet country. It's a country that's existed within its current borders for less time than I've been alive. And I come from the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Yeah.
Where there's no freedom. And here I am in Ukraine having a pizza 2 blocks from my house, and life is normal. My friends are telling me they haven't. One friend told me she had not left her apartment in Seattle in 56 days.
Unbelievable.
And I couldn't understand that.
I don't understand how people can
I hadn't
do
stayed
that.
home a single day.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. So Ukraine was actually a great place to live for the last couple of years until all the fire and explosions.
God. That's absolutely insane. I mean, it wasn't terrible in New Hampshire, but I was shocked at how restrictive some things were in New Hampshire, or how the people were going along with it, I guess is what I'm saying. Because, like you say, the government goons can say whatever they want. If the people don't go along with it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, Dictator Sununu was pretty bad. He was, I don't know if he wasn't the worst of all the governors, which are now called dictators, because he shut down the legislature. And if you're a governor and you shut down the legislature for 16 months due to a state of emergency, and you say, we don't need legislators to pass legislation. By the way, it's the same root word. I don't know if you knew this. Legislation is the same root word as legislator.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I don't speak French.
No one knows this, actually. Legislators are supposed to write legislation. But nowadays, we have dictators and agencies and courts writing legislation. So he shut it down for 16 months and passed, I think, 86 executive orders. And a lot of people went along with it as well. So it wasn't just a dictator. It was, police enforcing it and a lot of people going along with it. But again, the propaganda from the U.S. government, CNN, Laura Fauci and Psaki and all the others, and government schools and other media, and that's why a lot of people did fall for it. Although every day we're seeing more people wake up to it.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's all disappearing, thankfully, for the moment, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to bring it back into play as soon as some new variant comes out.
I heard there's a new variant.
Right.
There's always
a
new
new
variant.
one. Whether or not they're going to be able to, again, get as many people on board this time around, because I did see something about in the United States, apparently, I don't know if it was like half of the people who've been vaccinated or fully vaccinated are not getting the booster. So there's a large drop off, like a cliff, basically, of people who have just said, "I've had enough. I'm not going any further with this stuff." So there may be a real, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but a point at which there's a significant, I don't know if it's a majority, but a significant chunk of the population they're fed up. And they're not going to keep getting pushed around on this. But we'll see. The number here, if you want to join the show, 603-283-6160. Now, y'all were disagreeing about a pretty important topic.
The most important.
And I'm going to bring that back up coming up here in moments.
Poke the bear.
I feel like we've covered the Ukraine thing pretty good here. And if you want to comment, you want to join us, 603-283-6160. You're welcome to. If you got a question for Laser, like I said, he's been there for the last couple of years, so he knows a lot more than the average person, certainly more so than the mainstream media does. And coming up, we're going to talk about independence, because that's ultimately what was at play, supposedly, in Ukraine, is some areas, some people declared independence from Ukraine. The Ukrainian government doesn't want to recognize that, so they apparently have been bombing them. Now, apparently some of the people in the Donbass areas have been shooting back. And so can independence happen? Can secession happen without violence? And that's a question that we can take a look at coming up here in moments. Hour number 2 is on the way. This is Free Talk Live. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US President Joe Biden says he supports the idea of expelling Russia from the G20 as punishment for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The president has been attending meetings in Brussels with Nato, the G20 and the European Council, during which he announced new American sanctions against Russia. And NATO as a whole pledged more military support for Ukraine, as reporter Linda Kennedy explains from Brussels.
NATO is going to give anti-tank missiles and drones to Ukraine. It's going to supply support or equipment that can defend against biological, chemical and nuclear attacks. The announcement is there's going to be $1 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and the US is going to accept 100,000 Ukrainian refugees.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told reporters that NATO is determined to continue sending weaponry to help Ukraine and additional forces to the alliance's eastern flank.
We will work with like-minded allies to ramp up lethal aid to Ukraine at scale, providing kit to President Zelensky in the quantity and with the quality that he needs to defend his country from its bullying neighbour.
Speaking to reporters, President Biden was asked if Russia uses chemical weapons in Ukraine, will NATO respond?
It would trigger a response in kind. Whether or not you're asking whether NATO would cross, we'd make that decision at the time.
On Friday, President Biden heads to Poland, and he's hinted at a possible trip to Ukraine, although held back from disclosing the details. In Moscow, 33 companies have resumed trading on the Moscow exchange for the first time in a month after the stock market closed to prevent a massive sell-off, as FSN's Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Banks, oil companies, fertilizer and nickel exporters all did well when trading resumed, but the exchange and central bank have taken extreme precautions to ensure a stable return to operations. Not all companies were allowed to resume trading, short selling was banned, some companies are thought to have bought back shares, and Russia's National Wealth Fund has been ordered to invest up to $9 billion in Russia's biggest companies over the year to soften the blow.
The United Nations has condemned North Korea's test of a banned intercontinental ballistic missile, as FSN's Sarah Walton reports from UNHQ in New York.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the missile strike was another break of a moratorium on launches of this nature that was announced by North Korea itself. And he said it was a clear violation of Security Council resolutions. Guterres urged North Korea to desist from taking further counterproductive actions and pledged to work with all parties to establish peace and denuclearize the Korean peninsula. Sarah Walton, New York.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, Madeleine Albright, the first woman to serve as US Secretary of State, who died yesterday at the age of 84. Hers was an extraordinary life, fleeing from Nazi-overrun Czechoslovakia with her parents, then finding a new life that began at the age of 11 when they fled communism and moved to the United States. President Bill Clinton appointed her US ambassador to the UN, then Secretary of State, where she advocated for NATO's expansion and for the US to play a more intense role in the crisis in Bosnia. She passionately believed the world would be a more peaceful place if more women became politicians and diplomats.
I do think when there are more women that the
the tone of the conversation changes, and also the goals of the conversation change. But it doesn't mean that the whole world would be a lot better if it were totally run by women. If you think that, you've forgotten high school. So there is a way, when there are more women, that there's an attempt to develop some understanding. I think we're better about putting ourselves into the other guy's shoes and having more empathy.
Madeleine Albright speaking at TEDx in 2010. A ubiquitous presence in Washington, even in retirement. She was a trailblazer who died at the very moment war has returned to Europe. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, US President Joe Biden says he supports the idea of expelling Russia from the G20 as punishment for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. NATO members have pledged more military support for Ukraine. In Moscow, 33 companies have resumed trading on the Moscow Stock Exchange after it was closed for a month to prevent a massive sell-off. And the United Nations has condemned North Korea's test of a banned intercontinental ballistic missile. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
A new video game is being criticized for its harsh portrayal of barbed wire. Here's GameBite's Caitlin Torres with more.
Bethesda's The Evil Within is a nightmarish adventure that shows bloody and rusty barbed wire being used to hurt innocent people, which has angered the nation's barbed wire producers.
Barbed wire is a positive force for good. It protects our junkyards from scrap metal thieves and helps keep our cattle ranches safe from rustlers. But Bethesda thinks it's okay to ignore all the benefits of barbed wire and make it look like some scary thing used by murderers.
The designers have promised that the game will feature prominent messages extolling the virtues of the sharp steel fencing. But barbed wire groups say that it's too little too late.
If Bethesda wants to make this right, they should have the main character go behind a fence and then be safe from monsters because they can't climb over the barbed wire to get him. Now that's a game I would play.
Let's hope Bethesda listens.
Thanks, Caitlin.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the second hour of the program here. You can bring up anything that you want to discuss. The phones are open at 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. In the studio tonight, it's Ian.
This is Laser.
And Alu.
Laser and Alu joining us from LibertyBlock.com. We spent the first hour talking a lot about Ukraine because Laser spent the last couple of years there and has, perspective. But you still don't really know what exactly is happening there because it's hard to really have any clue, even if you're actually on the ground, to know what's really going on. You can't trust the Russian government. You certainly can't trust the Ukrainian government, and the Western media is just parroting whatever the Ukrainian government says. So if you got a question about Ukraine or what it was like to live there, you can certainly answer those questions because you actually did live there, and you were saying it's surprisingly free by comparison during the COVID crackdowns compared to, say, most of the United States.
Yeah, life was pretty good for a couple of years.
So we're going to get into something that the two of you guys disagree on, apparently, and that is something to do with secession. And I want to get into that, but first, Sarah's on the line, and she's in New Mexico. Sarah, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, I have to get up the speaker. Our state legislature, they're debating right now whether to give us like about $300 per person or $600 a person state rebate to make up for the gas prices. And
now, hold on, Sarah, before you go on, is this $600 or $300 one time, like for the rest of the year, or will this be per month? What's the deal?
Well, it sounds like, I think it's like a one-time deal with our tax returns, but you have to file it.
Right, like so you guys have an income tax there.
Yeah, I think so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but with me...
She thinks so. She's lived there her whole life. She's never worked a day in her life, so she actually has no idea whether or not there's an income tax in the state of New Mexico.
Well, all I know is that I'm qualified for $70 state rebate that I could claim, but it's so much like hassle that I just forgot it. I mean, I just don't bother with it. And the same thing for this $300. by the time I get my printout, calling Social Security, run around, figure out where to go to get the free tax help. And I sit there for a whole hour waiting for this, for them to do my taxes. And if I forget my bank number, my routing number, they make you go back and do it all over again. So I just learned it's not worth the money for the aggravation.
You know, that's really interesting, Sarah, because I got to say, that's a perspective I didn't expect to hear from somebody who loves the idea of communism. And you just think the government should run everything, but yet here you are giving us a great example of how frustrating you find the government's process to simply get, you know, a $70 or a $300 rebate. I mean, why would you want this same government to be running everything from health care to providing you with food?
Well, you know what? I really believe that the government-run system would be run a lot more smoother. I mean, it's just...
Why? The system you're talking about is a government-run system. The very system you just explained to us that you, who don't even have a job, so you could absolutely spend as much time navigating this paperwork stack or whatever, that all the bureaucracy that you would need to. You've got plenty of time in which to do this, but even you are saying it's not worth your time to jump through all their ridiculous hoops, but yet you think it would somehow get better with more government?
Well, the thing is, I'm with a communist program. I mean, right now I'm getting Medicaid. I'm getting Social Security disability every month, and it was a pain in the butt to get on these things. The Social Security, I had to go to appointments, fill out an application. I actually had to have a social worker that helped me fill it out because I could not do it myself.
Because it's that complicated.
Well, I mean, for somebody like me, it was frustrating for me. It was like 13 pages. I got really intimidated.
Wow.
So, and then I had to.
But that was worth it to you because you get payments every month, right? Like it's ongoing. They're going to take care of you, so you jumped through those hoops.
Well, I did it in the beginning, so I get $840 a month. But you know what? About 20 years ago, they used to jack everybody up once a year and do a reevaluation. But what happens, they got a lawyer, and then they put a stop to it for harassing people. Once you get they were doing that. I would get called in. I was like so scared to make you see a psychiatrist, and they would interrogate me. Why can't you work? Why can't you work? And they were doing this to everybody that was disabled.
So now they can't even ask you anymore. Now it's just once you're signed up, you're good for life, huh?
Right. They don't bother you. But see, this $300, they make it so that, well, it's a way to like cheat you out of the people's money. They make it so it's not worth your while, and they blame you. It's like, we have a Section 8. We have all this rebate. You just don't claim it because you're lazy. Because it's not worth it for all the red tape and all the harassment that they make you go through. By the time you do get the money, I would spend like $200 worth of aggravation and grief every year.
And considering all the aggravation and grief, you want this government to run not just this part of your life, but every part of everyone's life.
Laser, well, the thing is, I'm gonna let go of this $300, you know, and the $70 every year that I could qualify for, and then they claim there's tens of thousands of people that could get free money, and they don't take it. But we'll show you how to get it.
Well, there's no such thing as free money.
It's a little gimmick.
For Sarah, there is.
Well, it's redistributed money from your neighbors and from us.
And she doesn't mind stealing. Laser, did you have a question for Sarah?
I was just going to comment that sounds like the entire taxation system, wherein they say you get all these rebates, but by the time you take 6 months off work to figure out how to fill out their documents that are intentionally impossible to fill, you've lost a lot more money than the money that they would give back to you that they already stole from you the first time.
So are you talking about the unemployment? That's how they do it. The unemployment, they treat you like you're a welfare recipient. They aggravate you.
Well, I would contend that by definition, unemployment is a form of welfare.
Yeah, but you know what? You earned it. You paid into the system.
I mean, that's one where you do pay into it, right? Like, I've never taken it. I've never looked.
Well, to some extent, we all pay into every tax
Let's
system.
say you paid in $5,000. Well, after the first $5,000 of unemployment you claim, well, then I paid into it for you.
Can you get more than what you paid in? Is that a thing? I don't know.
Unemployment? They have no idea how much you paid in.
I think so. I think it's not really like a thing you pay in for and you get like an investment. I think it's like a tax, like
it is.
Okay,
payroll tax, and then you get
All right, Sarah. So you love the government, but you don't like their paperwork. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, the thing about it is, in this case, it's too piddly. If they enticed me with a $600,
But you didn't
I might
answer my
jump on it.
question. I understand the money is what you're really focused on here because you just want to get more money from the state. But I just want to clarify: you really love all these government programs, but you don't like all the paperwork, right?
No, I don't like the paperwork. No, they aggravate you. Nothing's for free. Believe me. When
That's
they say
true. No such thing as a free lunch.
That I get. No, they harass you. They make you work for it. Believe it or not.
Yeah, Sarah, I have a question for you.
You would never know that. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Alu. Yeah, nice to meet you. I listen to you every night on Free Talk Live. It's great to talk to you live now. I actually love New Mexico. My little brother lived there. I love New Mexico.
I lived there a short while as well.
Yeah, I have a question for you. A lot of the aggravation, and I do agree it is aggravating, a lot of what you're dealing with is actually because of the federal government, because of DC politicians, these horrible guys like Trump and McConnell. If New Mexico were independent from the union, all of this would be done through your capital, which, what is that, Santa Fe? So all of this would be done through your state government, which would be a lot closer to home and more accountable. So do you support state independence for New Mexico? It would make your life a lot easier, just less aggravation and paperwork.
No, I think that's not important because each state has a lot of their autonomy. Our state lets the criminals run wild, and we're so kind to the homeless people and panhandlers. So each state does their own little thing.
Well, plus she gets money from the feds.
Yeah. Having lived in New Mexico for a short while, I learned a few things, such as that Albuquerque is the Grand Theft Auto capital of the United States of America.
Really?
It is one of the highest violent crime cities in the United States of America. New Mexico's education system ranks 51st in the United States
is it Sarah
of America.
or someone else? There's a caller who says
one
New
of
Mexico's
the
last in
poorest
everything.
states in the United States of America. New Mexico has a lot of improvement to do on literally all of the things.
So 51st, does that mean it's worse than D.C.?
Yes, sir.
Jeez. Thanks, Sarah, for the call tonight. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. It's not just New Mexico that's talking about giving people money for gasoline. Now they're talking about a national monthly stimulus check for that very reason.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
When Monster Hunter International discovers one of Isaac Newton's wardstones being auctioned off, they decide to steal it and use it to destroy the Chaos God once and for all. But a mysterious thief upends their plan, and it soon becomes a race against time as something much older and infinitely more evil awakens in the jungles of South America. Monster Hunter Bloodlines by New York Times bestselling author Larry Correia and Baen Books. Visit monsterhunternation.com for more.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it.
Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
There are basically two types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. The phones are open here. You can join us, 603-283-6160. It's Ian and a couple of the guys from LibertyBlock.com. We got Laser and Alu in the studio here tonight. So there's lots of stuff in the news that we could talk about, and I do want to get into the secession topic, but since Sarah brought it up, and she's actually gotten pretty good at bringing up issues. She used to only talk about, like, pedestrian-related stuff in Albuquerque, and now she kind of talks about quite a variety. So since she brought this one up, I've had this one sitting in show prep for a couple of days. The story from Fox5ny.com, where everybody knows the price of gas is up. Los Angeles on Tuesday became the first major city in the U.S. to reach an average gas price of over $6.
I really wish you hadn't even said that out loud. My insides hurt.
Well, at least we don't live in Los Angeles. There's a lot of reasons not to live there. But that's according to Gas Buddy, which reported the national average gas price has, it's over $4 right now, wherever it is in the U.S. And according to a proposal from representatives, whoever from Connecticut and California and Illinois, they are looking to give Americans $100 a month. Yeah, free money.
I would like to point out several things. One, I think let's all be shocked together that these representatives are from Connecticut, California, and Illinois. Two, I literally filled up my truck about an hour and a half before coming on this show tonight.
Okay.
It cost me $120.
For how many gallons?
A lot. 30 gallons. It was a little under 30 gallons. I have a 35-gallon tank.
Okay.
But I literally found the cheapest gas station within 3 states. I drove my truck down to about, I don't know, after it said I had 16 miles left in there, it just said, your fuel is low. So I drove it dry to drive through several states to arrive at the cheapest gas station between southern Maryland and the middle of New Hampshire, and it still cost me $120.
He drove halfway to Florida today to look for gas.
I drove 550 miles today.
Virginia?
But since Maryland, the cheapest gas station was near Hooksett, New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. So I drove all the way there and saved about $30-ish on my tank. About $14 on my tank. And it still cost me $120. So unless you drive a go-kart or one of those $200 Barbie cars from Walmart, I'm not sure just how effective $100 a month is going to be for
Why do you got to bring up my car?
Hey, the Barbie cars are sweet. You know what it costs to get that paint job on my truck? Like $4,000.
So they're talking about what they're calling a quote-unquote energy rebate of $100 per month and $100 for each dependent, apparently, for the rest of 2022 in any month where the national average gas prices exceed $4 per gallon. And I expect that's probably going to be for the rest of the year.
Oh, yeah.
At least.
I love it. I say I'm all for it. Let's go, Brandon. And let's go accelerationism. and give out more free money.
You're saying let the printing presses go as high as possible.
I just really like the part where most Americans who have 13 kids don't really even own a car. So let's give them $1,300 a month. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. They wouldn't know.
Yeah,
whether
I
or
think
not you have
this
a
will
car.
just more inflation. Let's keep printing it. Let's go 30 trillion in debt. We'll be 40 trillion in debt in a few months, maybe. It's going to be 10 trillion every few months, and the DC empire and the U.S. dollar will collapse. And that's another reason, by the way, I'm optimistic about independence. In that, and we all agree, once the DC empire collapses, because the dollar collapses and the petrodollar, and now some countries might accept things besides the dollar, like maybe yuan or other stuff or other forms of currency. I'm not the greatest expert in, but once that happens, the U.S. dollar plummets in demand. And then, there's less demand and less value of the dollar. And then the DC empire collapses because they can't pay their own defense contractors and military and billion-dollar bombs and $1 trillion F-35.
Thought.
Then we'd be independent once they collapse. So that's another good thing.
No doubt, and we're going to get into that as well. By the way, the number is 603-283-6160. But here's the statement from, which representative is this? Thompson, whoever the hell that is. Thompson from California. He said, Americans are feeling the impact at the pump of Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And right now, we must work together on common sense policy solutions to ease the financial burden that my constituents are feeling, he said.
I love that they can blame everything on Putin now.
Yeah. Very convenient.
Yeah, even though they first came in, when were the first rockets fired? 3-4 weeks ago, 5 weeks?
Something like that.
24th, a month.
Yeah, so a month. And they even things, inflation was an issue in the United States, since 1913, but especially the last few months. Last year, inflation's been out of control, obviously, and a few months ago even they announced it's like 7.9% annually, which it's probably higher. It's probably 10, 15, 20, 30%. But they blame it on Putin, even though, them invading Ukraine, and now there's a bit of issues with Russia, with, oil from Russia or Ukraine. That's true. But the great thing about them saying we're going to protect you from Putin is it's the opposite. What the federal government is doing with sanctions and making it harder for international trade is hurting Russian citizens, hurting American citizens,
Sure is.
driving up the cost of all the products that now can't get here because of coronafascism. There were supply chain issues and things were more expensive. There are plenty of things we just couldn't get because of coronafascism. Because Let's Go Brandon had how many hundreds or thousands of ships off the coast of California couldn't dock and unload. So there were supply chain issues. But now
still are, from what I understand.
Yeah. But because of even more sanctions on these countries, on Russia, which produces plenty of things, and now just hampers international trade, and now it makes things more expensive for us. So when they say we're going to punish Putin, they're not. Putin is fine. I'm sure he's well fed, but they're hurting innocent Russian people with sanctions, like you were talking about on Free Talk Live a lot. And sanctions just hurt people, the consumer and the producers, because they can't get the money and we can't get the products. So the sanctions are hurting the people. So this guy Thompson, screw him. He's hurting the people with his sanctions in the federal government.
Oh, but they're going to love him because he's cutting him a check. Now, it hasn't passed. It's just a proposal right now. But, I don't see any reason why this won't pass. Right, every other giveaway in the last 2 years, all this quote-unquote stimulus checks, they didn't have much opposition, did they? It was a bipartisan effort. Remember, the first stimulus checks came out under Trump. This wasn't some sort of Democrat program.
I got comments on comments. So, one, this is totally going to pass, whether in this form or some other. I think we've learned over the last 2 years that if it's any sort of vague proposal to rain money from the skies and print it, they're going to do it.
Bold prediction. Thomas Massey will be the only no vote and he'll get destroyed for
I
it.
will totally second your bold prediction because God bless that man and his off-the-grid home in the hills that he built with his bare hands, because somebody in this country has to work hard and still succeed. So I hate to say it as someone who grew up a very patriotic American, but very early on, before this whole war actually broke out back in early January, when things slowly started to ramp and there was talk, and I sat down, and I like to consider myself a relatively intelligent human being who's relatively well-versed in the history of war, especially in the last 200 years, and every conclusion I arrived at was that the only real winner, if Ukraine and Russia go to all-out war, is probably the United States. And much of the reasoning is because of what you just said, which is that our economy was sliding, and by sliding, I mean it was free-falling off an endless cliff. And at some point or another, as has happened throughout history, when any economy falls and keeps falling and keeps falling and keeps falling, and wealth disappears, and people's livelihoods disappear, and their businesses collapse, and you take everything they've saved, eventually the people have had enough, and Marie Antoinette loses her head when she says, let them eat cake. And the only way out of that is to make a bigger bad guy.
A boogeyman.
A boogeyman. If you have
the new Hitler.
That's right, the new Hitler.
Well, plenty of analysts have been saying this. I think conservatives, libertarians, centrists have been saying after corona-fascism wanes, after 2 years we're sick of it, they're going to have some big war for us to focus on.
It is.
You need it. You need
right
the boogeyman. Blame him.
The number's
everything.
603-283-6160. You can join the show and share your thoughts. The $100 check might be coming soon from the federal government. Eventually, they're probably going to force you to take their central bank digital currency, but they're not ready for that yet. We got more on the way, though. You can share your thoughts. Also, we'll talk about secession coming up. Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 27th through July 3rd for the 6th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which sold out for the first time in 2021. Fork Fest takes place the week after Pork Fest, but Fork Fest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 27th through July 3rd. There's no better place to celebrate Independence Day than around other freedom-loving activists in the Shire. You can find out more at the unofficial website, forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the Forkfest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the Forkfest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there. Forkfest.party.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. US President Joe Biden says he supports the idea of expelling Russia from the G20 as punishment for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The president has been attending meetings in Brussels with Nato, the G20 and the European Council, during which he announced new American sanctions against Russia. And NATO as a whole pledged more military support for Ukraine, as reporter Linda Kennedy explains from Brussels.
NATO is going to give anti-tank missiles and drones to Ukraine. It's going to supply support or equipment that can defend against biological, chemical and nuclear attacks. The announcement is there's going to be $1 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and the US is going to accept 100,000 Ukrainian refugees.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told reporters that NATO is determined to continue sending weaponry to help Ukraine and additional forces to the alliance's eastern flank.
We will work with like-minded allies to ramp up lethal aid to Ukraine at scale, providing kit to President Zelensky in the quantity and with the quality that he needs to defend his country from its bullying neighbour.
Speaking to reporters, President Biden was asked if Russia uses chemical weapons in Ukraine, will NATO respond?
It would trigger a response in kind. Whether or not you're asking whether NATO would cross, we'd make that decision at the time.
On Friday, President Biden heads to Poland, and he's hinted at a possible trip to Ukraine, although held back from disclosing the details. In Moscow, 33 companies have resumed trading on the Moscow Exchange for the first time in a month after the stock market closed to prevent a massive sell-off, as FSN's Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Banks, oil companies, fertilizer and nickel exporters all did well when trading resumed, but the exchange and central bank have taken extreme precautions to ensure a stable return to operations. Not all companies were allowed to resume trading, short selling was banned, some companies are thought to have bought back shares, and Russia's National Wealth Fund has been ordered to invest up to $9 billion in Russia's biggest companies over the year to soften the blow.
The United Nations has condemned North Korea's test of a banned intercontinental ballistic missile, as FSN's Sarah Walton reports from UNHQ in New York.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the missile strike was another break of a moratorium on launches of this nature that was announced by North Korea itself. And he said it was a clear violation of Security Council resolutions. Guterres urged North Korea to desist from taking further counterproductive actions and pledged to work with all parties to establish peace and denuclearize the Korean peninsula. Sarah Walton, New York.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, and you're invited if you want to join the program here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And in the studio here tonight, you've got me, Ian.
I'm Laser.
And Alu.
Laser and Alu joining us from LibertyBlock.com. Be sure you check out their website. We're going to go back into your phone calls and thoughts. Also, do want to let you know about our Odyssey channel. We are streaming live there every single night, and video archives are available anytime you want them over at video.freetalklive.com. That's where you'll find our channel, and we sure would appreciate it if you follow, aka subscribe to the channel there over at video.freetalklive.com. We're going to go back to your phone calls and thoughts. Chris is on the line in Arizona listening to K-Talks. Hello, Chris. Chris? Arizona? Oh, man, he was there. Chris going once? Chris going twice? He was on a cell phone, so I'm going to put him back on hold. Maybe he was just in a bad cell, and hopefully we will get him back. He was fired up about Sarah, so I definitely want to hear. I definitely want to hear what he has to say. We'll get back to that. But in related news to this story about potential $100 per month stipend being cut to, I guess, everyone in America, presuming this thing passes. And Laser, your prediction is this is going to pass.
I mean, if we passed a $3.whatever trillion bill and then another, what's another?
Yeah.
Million, billion, trillion, who cares?
Exactly. They've got the printing presses on full bore at this point, so it doesn't matter to them. And $100 a month is, pennies, basically, compared to what they're giving away to the corporation. So, whatever. But then there's another story here. The same story by Fox5NY.com, but the second portion, a Representative Peter DeFazio of Oregon has proposed the Stop Gas Price Gouging Tax and Rebate Act. The bill would, quote, create a windfall profit tax on excessive corporate profits and return revenue to American consumers in the form of a tax rebate. DeFazio said big oil's foaming at the mouth. After price gouging Americans in 2021 to make record profits, big oil is now reaping the benefits of Vladimir Putin's price hike. My legislation would tax their excess profits in 2022 and return the revenue back to Americans. It's time to put people over profits, period, he says.
As a clinician, I just want to point out that psychosis is a real thing, and his reality is clearly not the one
he's
the
a
rest
communist,
of us live in.
and there was actually a similar bill proposed by communists in New Hampshire a year or two ago. I wrote an article about it for Liberty Block, not only a year ago. In February of 2021, we published an article on LibertyBlock.com titled Disturbing Socialist SB 138, Senate Bill 138, attacks the free market. I think this was the one that pretty much said anytime there's market disruption, which means anything in the world, I'm sure corona fascism is market disruption, anything that's somewhat essential, which they kind of list like pretty much every product in the world, from toilet paper to Band-Aids and everything else. If there's excessive profiting, like if you increase it by 5% or more, then it'll be a crime. So I love how they say excessive profits, because profit means...
Who decides?
Yeah.
I also like how they spend 2 years burning every company and business to the ground, but then when people try to make up for the fact that they've had 2 years of insanely negative net income, now it's price gouging.
Yeah, the bill would make it illegal for anyone to sell any essential item at more than 15% what the baseline cost was. So if something increases 15% over the span of, I don't know, a month or a year. But again, inflation alone is probably 10, 15, 20, 30%.
Well, what are we at now? Technically, officially, it's 7%?
8%? 7.9%, I think, was the consumer product, whatever the hell they call it, index that happened for the month of February.
Right.
The wholesale price index hit 10%.
Jeez.
So that's like double digits for the first time in 40 years. I think the first time in actually the history of the producer price index being calculated.
What about real estate? Is it up like 20, 30%?
Quite a bit.
Who knows?
It depends on where you are. So you can't really just say real estate because it's different in Chicago as it is in New Hampshire, as it is in Jacksonville. But we just talked about this the other night. Actually, again, credit to Sarah for bringing the topic up. But there was a story on 60 Minutes where they had interviewed real estate agents and people who own houses that are renting. Rents in a lot of cities have gone up 30 to 40% in the last year. So the people who are in a year-long lease, when it's time for them to renew their lease, their landlords are coming to them saying, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pay me 40% more.
And he can't make 40% because that guy, Mr. Smith, who's leasing, and it just went up 30%, can't sell his products at his convenience store down the block for more than 15% more because these goons, it didn't pass in New Hampshire, but there's this federal bill and all that.
Oh, yeah.
If this were the law, men with guns would come to punish them.
I want to point out that there was that whole rent freeze movement / you don't have to pay thing by the federal government during COVID.
For a long time.
For a very long time. And on top of all of that, I think that this means we're in the pipeline for an amazing stimulus bill called the You Deserve a Roof stimulus. And that'll be at least $1,000 a month for every individual over the age of cat.
Well, UBI is going to happen. It's inevitable now. In a year or two, we're going to have a UBI in the United States.
I mean, we almost already do. They just like to break it into 11 different parts and call it, this is for your shoes, this is for your
and it got so
school,
crazy that
this is for your
Andrew
house.
Yang said, let's get rid of everything and have a UBI. And I'm like, you know what? You're so socialist, but we're already communist. You're right. I agree with you.
In fairness,
if we could have a UBI and get rid of
his
everything
version
else,
simplifies it. We have 22 different things that comprise a UBI.
We would save billions just on administrative costs.
He's right.
Because it would get rid of welfare programs. Yep.
Which presumes that they would get rid of all those programs.
Well, what he said, what Yang was saying when he was running in the primary is my plan would be to get rid of everything and just have UBI.
Yeah, but his plan wouldn't necessarily be what they pass.
Definitely.
Well, listen, Ian, in Congress, things happen to a bill, and there's input, and in the bill, it'll be 3,000 pages.
And you know who's going to be given
things
input?
Might be in there.
You know who's going to be given input? The people who work in the welfare offices that would be proposed to be shut down because of this. All of those bureaucrats are going to come in there and say, whoa, our jobs, we got unions here.
By the time the bill gets passed, it's like, wait, there's $87 billion going to Iran? How is this in the bill? Yeah, it's in the
I'm
American
mostly
Roof Act.
focused on the $143 million going for a study from Stanford University on what happens if you feed the cracker goldfish to the goldfish.
So I think something you're going to see later this year once the midterm elections start heating up and candidates start taking positions on things is you're going to see a lot of this talk like this last bill that I talked about where they're talking about taxing big oil or going after the corporate profits, right? Because remember, before Putin was the go-to bad guy for, it's all his fault. They were saying, it's the corporations, they're the ones causing inflation because they're raising prices. And it's
the corporations bailed out by the federal government for the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars.
And they're just so greedy. Well, here's this narrative is still in play. Okay, so commondreams.org, which is a hard leftist blog site, Jake Johnson reports on a survey that shows, let's see here, Friday it was released by the advocacy group Fight Corporate Monopolies. They took a poll, and they showed that 82% of registered U.S. voters blame big companies for at least some of the recent inflation spike and want elected officials to, quote, take on powerful CEOs and rein in corporate greed to lower prices.
It's almost like propaganda works, Ian.
It is. And so so I think you're going to see this fall, you're going to see a lot of promises from politicians about how they're going to target the corporations. They're going to make them pay. Maybe price controls are going to be thrown out there as a potential solution to this, which of course is just begging for even quicker economic disaster and destruction of small businesses. And because obviously a mom and pop business is going to get hurt the hardest by things like price controls. And I just think that's what you're going to see.
Yep.
Well, it's communism. I mean, price controls, it's really right there with communism, socialism, authoritarianism.
Yeah,
the government tells you what you can sell things for.
Just wait. I mean, it's very easy to control the price when it all costs one ticket and you wait in line for your stale bread.
Well, you know what Bernie Sanders said about bread lines? I think he said it was good.
Did he?
It's organized and people get bread and it's fair. Yeah.
I mean, in fairness to Bernie Sanders, he predates bread. So I get it.
Did you know Bernie Sanders was interviewed for this? He's a co-sponsor. He's a co-sponsor.
Everyone deserves bread and a roof over their head.
What is this legislation they're even talking about? I don't even know. But there's some sort of legislation, I guess, involved here already. I'm not really clear on what it is, but he says last year, oil and gas companies made $174 billion in profits. This year, they're on track to make more.
He read that news from his vacation home, number 4.
Yeah. The number, if you want to join us here, 603-283-6160. 603-283-6160. The sad news is Americans are completely ignorant about what inflation is and how it happens. There's more on the way here. This is Free Talk Live. It's why we need independence. Coming up.
The Shire Free Church offers a sanctuary to those seeking an escape from state churches.
The Shire Free Church is an interfaith, diverse group of people that may not share identical theological beliefs. As a member in or minister of the Shire Free Church, you are a sovereign individual and may be the faith of your choice.
We don't claim to have all of the answers.
We are open to all peaceful people.
We want to learn from each other.
What unifies the Shire Free Church and its diverse members is peace,
love,
and liberty. There are many paths to God, one for every individual.
The Shire Free Church does not define a specific path beyond those parameters that must be your foundation.
Peace as your way.
Love as your guide.
And liberty as your light.
Learn more at church.shiresociety.com.
That's church.shiresociety.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com. Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit shiresociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at shiresociety.com. That's shiresociety.com. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can bring up whatever you want to talk about. And just dial in here to do it. 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, you've got Ian.
I'm Laser.
And Alu.
Those guys, Laser and Alu, joining us from LibertyBlock.com. Be sure to check them out over there. They have a podcast and various different articles. I don't know how many you're doing per week, Alu, but I don't know how you do anything else. He's got like a full-time job. He's got, I don't know, 5 articles per week or something that he's cranking out over there. At
he does more. He's giving carpal tunnel a run for its money.
Incredible stuff. Check them out. So we're going to get into the discussion that you guys were having as you walked in the front door here at the studio tonight. There was just this cacophony of noise out on the front porch because you guys were just arguing about secession, and not so much about whether or not secession can happen, but whether or not it can happen without violence. I don't want to misrepresent your position.
No, you nailed it. To be clear,
Laser?
we both firmly believe in the smallest possible form of organization and or government, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is. The smaller it is, the better it is.
So like the individual would be the optimal one?
If I could be my own government, I promise I would treat me well.
Okay. And if you don't, then it's you. So do you how you want.
And to be
right?
even more clear, we both agree with independence. We've both supported independence.
And is it true that Laser
years.
recruited you into the idea of independence?
I don't know. I mean, he in a lot of ways, he, being a year and a half older, he was first to the liberty movement before I was. When I was 18, he was 19 and a half.
Okay.
And when he turned 18, he registered as Libertarian Party.
Oh, wow.
So he was already understood enough to know that the two parties
Where
sucked.
was this, in Connecticut?
This was back in New York.
When we lived in New York.
Where your libertarian vote means exactly nothing.
About as much as a Republican vote. So and I was still 18. I was in high school playing football. And I started to pay attention more. I was an average conservative. I voted for, my dad said vote for the Republicans. I voted for a Republican. I knew the basics of free markets and gun rights and all that. I respected my police and all that. And as I followed the primaries in 2016, I started thinking Rand Paul, Ted Cruz saying some things that make sense. Then I grew to like Rand Paul a lot more, obviously. He was saying liberty things. And I started learning more, but Laser was still kind of already voluntarist, identified as anarchist, I think, when he was 18, 19 years old.
That's me.
Then over the last few years, as I became more libertarian, I thought independence was a no-brainer. So no one ever had to really convince me, I don't think. We both supported liberty and independence forever. And to be clear, what we were arguing about, and I know we were pretty intense. I'm sure we woke up the whole Keene and possibly half of Vermont, because when we argue, we're passionate, and we both agree with independence that it should happen, and it's the right thing to happen, and the DC Empire sucks and has to go. But he was saying if it happens, the U.S. government will kill us. It can't happen peacefully. We want it to be peaceful, like we said in our amendment, but they will not let us go. They will rather kill us. And I was saying I am not so sure. Maybe they wouldn't kill us. Let's declare independence. If they kill us, it's on them, but I don't think they would. But if they do, we'll die peacefully. We just want to leave. The right to be left alone. So that was the argument. He thinks we both agree with it. He thinks they'll kill us if we leave, and I'm hoping. And
how
I'm
many
optimistic
people do you think they're going to kill? Are they going to drop a nuclear weapon on New Hampshire? Or are they going to just go in and target the leadership? What do you think that they're going to do?
If I were to draw upon history, both in the United States and around the world, for practically all of well-documented history, I would say they will start with the leaders, but if push comes to shove, they would sooner see every single life extinguished than lose a piece of land over which they currently have a stranglehold.
No matter how terrible of a PR move that would be, I mean, they would lose so much legitimacy in the eyes of the rest of the population of the United States, don't you think? You don't think so?
For one generation. And my evidence for this in the United States is as the reason that I wound up the small L libertarian, because I don't even really affiliate with the party. I have only ever been registered to vote as a libertarian. I call it what you want, put whatever labels on it, whether it's an anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, small L libertarian. I simply believe you do you, I do me. Don't punch me, I won't punch you. Don't touch my wallet, and I don't care what you do. Now, in the United States, as I got into all of this when I was in high school, I was 14 to 15 years old, and I began to really, really spend time studying the foundation of the United States up until about the year 1900. And the entire United States completely changed in the 1860s. That war, which I refuse to call the Civil War, it has many names. It's called the Civil War, obviously. It's in some parts of the South, the War of Northern Aggression. I could go either way. Yeah. My favorite name is very simply Lincoln's War.
There you go.
Because this was a war by one man for his entirely egotistical purposes. This was Lincoln's War. Lincoln made it very clear, well along the campaign trail. To be clear, and I won't digress too much, but in the very, very brief period during which Lincoln was an elected politician in the state of Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, if you follow his voting record, was not of the opinion that black people should be allowed to own land or have any rights whatsoever.
You don't even have to follow his voting record. He talked about it.
He did. In his inauguration speech, when he won the presidency, he stated not only that he has no interest in ending slavery, but furthermore, that even if he did, he doesn't have the power.
Wow.
Until, of course, the Gettysburg Address, when, you know, it was a great PR move that had no effect because he didn't control the areas in which it still existed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not going to condone slavery. It's an awful, awful institution, and it's horrific. However, it was slowly on the way out. It probably would have lasted, but probably we didn't need to kill 725 to 800,000 people.
No, the rest of the world got rid of slavery without a war.
Exactly. And we didn't. And to be clear, Abraham Lincoln only jumped on that train when he realized it was the only way he could recruit people into the war. In the early war, Abraham Lincoln, so a very, very, very quick review of it all. Abraham Lincoln gets elected president. He says a lot of stuff. South Carolina says, absolutely not. We told you we were going to leave. We're out. The South Carolina legislature votes, formally and properly, that they are simply out. Other states begin to follow over the course of the subsequent months. More states followed. 2 states were wound up split, Kentucky and Maryland. The reason the Maryland flag looks so unique is that it's actually the Crossland and Calvert banners, and the South fought under one of those, and the North fought under the other. And after the war, when Maryland reconciled, they simply put them together, and that's why the Maryland flag looks like no other flag in the United States. Because Maryland was a split state, it tried to secede. Lincoln swept in and started arresting judges and politicians. The ones who he couldn't get escaped, and therefore they could never formally vote to secede, but they tried. And they in Kentucky had people fighting on both sides of the war. Obviously, Virginia initially, and then they split into Virginia and West Virginia, which was a southern state and a northern state. But in the early going, Lincoln had practically zero support for his war. He didn't. And you can still dig up northern newspapers from New York, from Philadelphia, from Boston, from all the northern states and cities, and nobody supported Lincoln's war. What Lincoln essentially did is blockade South Carolina, which most countries have always recognized as an act of war because you destroy the economy. He blockaded South Carolina. South Carolina said, "You're in our waters now. We are no longer a part of you. Please leave." He said no. They said, "You need to leave." He said no. They said, "Well, we'll shoot you." And he said, "Well, I'm not going anywhere." So eventually they fired on Fort Sumter, at which point Lincoln turned around and went, "Oh no, they fired at us. They started a war." Well, you're in their waters. He had no support. There were newspapers that saw this coming. There were journalists and editors that saw this coming. There were politicians that saw this coming. They said it. He promptly sent them to an island prison off the city of New York without any due process whatsoever because he suspended habeas corpus. It's nice to be the king.
Yeah.
And that was simply that. And he had no support, and yet he made the war anyway. And over the course of the war, he changed the narrative. He was clear in speech after speech, letter after letter. The war was about, and I quote, preservation of the Union.
Yep, always was.
That's what the war was. Lincoln didn't care about slaves. Lincoln didn't care about race. Lincoln didn't care about it. He cared about not being the guy who goes down in history under which he lost half the land he was elected to reign supreme over. And ultimately, that's what any leader anywhere in the world, anywhere in history, really cares about when it comes to dissatisfaction amongst their citizens and any sort of effort to leave it. And beyond the United States, where obviously it ended in the single bloodiest war, not just the bloodiest war, but that war killed more people than every single other war from the Revolutionary War till today combined. The Nazis couldn't kill more than 65% of the people that Abraham Lincoln could. There's your perspective. Now, if you look at everywhere else in the world, it's kind of been the same thing. Northern Ireland has been fighting for their independence forever. England is simply not going to have it. The Basque in northern Spain have been an independent kingdom. Their language is the only extant language in its entire family, and there is nothing related to it in the last 1,500 years at least.
Is this Catalonia?
This is the Basque.
I don't know the different areas of
So
Spain.
there are several different areas. Galicia was a kingdom. The Basque had their own kingdom. Spain is very, very split. Now, a lot of the Basque were fighting for independence, and are still, some of their groups and some of their people are considered terrorists by the Spanish government. The Basque, literally, their DNA branches off 2,000 years ago, and yet Spain still says, no, you're Spain.
Part of us.
Right.
But I know there was an independence movement in Catalonia, so that's not the same group. That's a different
group. There are several groups in Spain that had kingdoms and wanted them back.
And Madrid got very violent with the Catalonian.
Of course they did.
Independence as well. There's no doubt. 603-283-6160. But can it be done differently this time? Alu thinks it can. And we're going to dig in deeper here. Hour 3's on the way. You can join us. Free Talk Live. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. U.S. President Joe Biden says he supports the idea of expelling Russia from the G20 as punishment for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The president has attended meetings in Brussels with Nato and the G20, during which he announced new American sanctions against Russia and a plan to allow 100,000 refugees into the U.S. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
At a press conference in Brussels, the US president said that it would be up to the G20 to decide if Russia should be removed, but that he supported that decision. He also said that if the G20 couldn't agree, then Ukraine should be allowed to attend meetings as an observer. And he warned that the US stood ready to act if Russia used chemical weapons in Ukraine.
We would respond. We would respond if he uses it. The nature of the response would depend on the nature of the use.
And he also said that President Putin had been banking on NATO being split, wildly underestimating the Western military alliance's response, adding that NATO was more united today than it had ever been before. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Heavy fighting continues across Ukraine, including in the capital Kyiv and the besieged port city of Mariupol in the south. European Union officials have agreed on a landmark deal designed to rein in the power of the world's biggest tech firms. Officials in Brussels worked late into the evening, putting the finishing touches on the Digital Markets Act, which has been in the works for more than a year. This is directed squarely at large firms such as Meta, Amazon, and Apple, as it applies to what the EU calls gatekeeper platforms, with a market capitalization of at least 75 billion euros, or turnover in the European Economic Area of at least 7.5 billion euros. The law includes a raft of measures, such as restrictions on combining personal data from different sources and mandating companies to allow users to install apps from third-party platforms. The Digital Markets Act now has to be approved by a vote in the EU Parliament, where it's expected to pass. It would go into effect next year. U.S. markets rallied on Thursday after new figures showed a drop in unemployment claims. But trading remains volatile as the conflict in Ukraine continues. FSN's Sarah Walton reports from New York.
Wall Street recouped much of the losses made on Wednesday, with the Dow gaining 350 points, or 1%. The S&P was up 1.4%, and the Nasdaq gained 1.9%. Microchip makers were the big winners, with Intel climbing nearly 7%. Nvidia was up 10%. There was also a 4% increase for Bitcoin. It comes as new figures from the Labour Department showed jobless claims dropped to 187,000 last week. That's the lowest level since 1969.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, Madeleine Albright, the first woman to serve as US Secretary of State, who died yesterday at the age of 84. Hers was an extraordinary life, fleeing from Nazi-overrun Czechoslovakia with her parents, then finding a new life that began at the age of 11 when they fled communism and moved to the United States. President Bill Clinton appointed her US ambassador to the UN, then Secretary of State, where she advocated for Nato's expansion and for the US to play a more intense role in the crisis in Bosnia. She passionately believed the world would be a more peaceful place if more women became politicians and diplomats.
I do think when there are more women that the tone of the conversation changes and also the goals of the conversation change. But it doesn't mean that the whole world would be a lot better if it were totally run by women. If you think that, you've forgotten high school. So, there is a way when there are more women that there's an attempt to develop some understanding. I think we're better about putting ourselves into the other guy's shoes and having more empathy.
Madeleine Albright speaking at TEDx in 2010. A ubiquitous presence in Washington, even in retirement, she was a trailblazer who died at the very moment war has returned to Europe. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. On a visit to Brussels, Joe Biden says he supports the idea of expelling Russia from the G20 as punishment for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. EU officials agree a landmark deal designed to rein in the power of some of the world's biggest tech firms. And U.S. markets rally after new figures show a drop in unemployment claims. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
If you're just tuning in, a horrific accident. Dozens are dead and hundreds more injured after the Coors Light party train crashed in Pratt, Kansas. The train was barreling through a field on its way to liven up a boring, overheated barbecue when something went wrong. Partiers were thrown hundreds of feet from the train as the frost-powered locomotive careened through bystanders at its normal speed of over 27,000 miles per hour. Rescue crews are struggling to get close to the crash. The Rocky Mountain frost radiating from the downed silver bullet is flash freezing survivors' bodies as they try to escape the wreckage, and the OJ's hit song Love Train is looping at deafening levels. No word yet on the cause of the accident, but investigators are focusing now on the fact that the train weighs 400 million tons and was not on rails. Coors Light has released the following statement, quote, Coors Light regrets any loss of life caused by the Coors Light party train's raw, frosty power. Please continue to enjoy Coors Light. We'll have more on this story as it develops.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, kicking off the third hour here. You can join us. Phones are open if you want. The number is 603-283-6160. Maybe you've got an opinion about independence. We're talking about the question of can it happen? Can secession happen peacefully where the goons that you're seceding from don't actually drop a bomb on you or start shooting everybody? We're going to continue with that discussion here. With you tonight, you've got me, Ian.
Laser.
And Alu.
Laser and Alu joining us from LibertyBlock.com. Alu, you're a big advocate for independence here in New Hampshire. You're actually right now the president of the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, which has been around for at least the last decade. I'm pretty sure it was formed somewhere around
I think
2012, something like that. They do great work. They do outreach to inform the people of New Hampshire about independence. I have been for years an advocate of that organization. I've got a bunch of flyers that I'll take around to various different places. I've been to the county fair, handed people flyers there. I've been to, there's usually like a baseball game that they have on Independence Eve. So usually like the 3rd of July, they'll have like a baseball game. I've been out handing out flyers there. Like basically wherever it is that I feel there could be a crowd of people that might be interested in thinking about new ideas or, an idea that's time has come again, which is independence. I'll go do that thing. In fact, I've been to Let's see. I've been to the Black Lives Matter movements. I've been to the right-wing stuff in the last 2 years due to COVID. I think there's an anti-war event coming up this weekend.
This Saturday evening, there's actually going to be 2 concurrent rallies, roughly the same time, both like 12 to 5 at the State House, I believe. One is an anti-war, an anti-World War III nuclear war, because that would be bad. So they're doing a protest for that, and also a Corona-Fascism medical freedom protest.
I didn't know that was happening at the same time.
Yeah, I think they're both happening Saturday in the State House, so I'll be there.
Cool. I'm actually hoping to go out there as well, and so I imagine you and I will be flyering the crowd as we normally do. And my experience has been very positive when handing out these flyers. So I think the people of New Hampshire are way more interested than the politicians give them credit for. For listeners that maybe are new to the show, we just finished within a few weeks ago. CACR 32, as they call it here, which is the bill number for what is a constitutional amendment that, if it had passed the State House and the State Senate by 60% in each area, then it would have ended up on the ballot this November, and then it would have required 2/3 of the voters to vote for it in order for it to pass, which would have then basically declared independence, but peaceful independence for New Hampshire. Sadly, it didn't get through the State House. It went down pretty hard. 323 to 13 was the vote, and a lot of the politicians are afraid. They're afraid maybe of being bombed by the federal government, but they're mostly afraid of what the people will think. They're afraid of voting for this thing because they don't think they're going to get reelected. I think that they are wrong. We're going to find out because 13 of them did vote for it, and so we'll see this November how many of the 13 run again, because maybe they won't all run again. So of those that are running again, how many of them actually get reelected? That'll be a big indicator that we can show to the ones that wouldn't support this. But your position on this, Laser, is that, okay, fine, you can convince the people, because you'd have to, right, in order for there to be a vote like this. You'd have to convince a lot of people. You can convince the people, fine, great. You can convince the politicians, okay, good for you. And you're going to go ahead and declare peaceful independence, fine. Well, then you think the federal government is going to come in with as much violence as they can bring us, basically.
Well, I think there are steps before violence, but I think that there is no line they won't cross if they have to go that far.
So, like, before violence would be
absolute, utter, and complete trade embargoes. Nobody in, nobody out of New Hampshire, unless you have an ID from another state or you swear fealty to the United States of America as opposed to the state of New Hampshire.
And do you think the trade embargo would also include the port of New Hampshire, where they would physically block
everything, and I think there would be naval vessels sitting outside in the harbors.
So one, a blockade is an act of war, so they're declaring war, and then we'll go to war. And I explained in Blueprint for Liberty how the United States military actually cannot win a war against New Hampshire.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think they could. All they could do is drop a massive nuclear bomb and kill New Hampshire and the whole East Coast and D.C. So,
what was your argument for why the massive federal government with this huge military that lost in Afghanistan to a bunch of cave dwellers?
Exactly.
Why is it that they wouldn't be able to crush the people of New Hampshire?
Well, put it this way: they lost in Afghanistan. We are like Afghanistan, but more well armed, possibly more organized, and.
Afghanistan may be better armed after the billions of dollars of weapons left there.
We only left them hundreds
the
of
one
Blackhawks.
disadvantage is that if they say we're terrorists, they're probably not going to give us weapons like they did with the Taliban. but we're also closer. So with Afghanistan, they could have done less targeted strikes. Whereas in New Hampshire, if they're going to do any military strike as far as ballistics, a missile or a bomb, they really have to be targeted. So for instance, and who would they even bomb? The leaders of the independence movement, the people who are very active. Ian, Alu, Carla, okay, they can bomb our houses. Yeah, they can bomb our houses still because our movement's the most decentralized one maybe in existence. They would have to kill, 5,000 different leaders with very targeted bombs. But even that, there would be collateral damage that would kill children. We know how right now the right, the left, center, everyone does not like the fact that we are bombing hospitals or collateral damage, killing kids in Yemen or Iraq or wherever, Afghanistan. So the collateral damage, especially for New Hampshire, and those are foreign, they're foreign people, different world, different country, not very similar. People who have cousins and neighbors. Everyone here has cousins and friends throughout the United States and family. Sure. If people in New Hampshire are being killed, whether they're leaders in the movement or not, or others, if they're being killed by bombs, if targeted strikes or wide, big strikes, if they're being killed, there's no appetite for that in the United States. And like you said, and you were actually making my point, Lincoln did not have support for the war to kill Americans. Overall, with propaganda and with force and deporting people or killing them or putting them in prisons, he eventually killed those who didn't support him. So all that were left were supporters. And there's propaganda. But now, while they have propaganda and even more media propaganda. We also have more technology that can let me send a text on Signal and it goes around the world to almost everyone in the world within 3 seconds. So that's an advantage for us. So again, what you still didn't convince me in your opening statement was why there would be an appetite. And like you said when we first walked in, when we were arguing, you said 100% of people in the United States would support the U.S. government killing everyone in New Hampshire if they voted to secede peacefully.
No way.
Well, put it this way: how much of America has drawn arms over whatever happened on January 6th, and the fact that there are dozens and dozens of people still detained, still in solitary confinement, still being fed stale bread twice a day and walked for 30 minutes a day like a dog with rabies? How many people in America have stormed the Capitol, stormed their state capitals, or done actually anything other than maybe yell about it?
That's a completely different situation. Independence.
But I would contend that...
What he's saying is that people won't rise up against the tyrannical government even if they do sickening things.
That's probably true.
I'm saying that if the government declares people as armed and dangerous, treasonous terrorists,
we've gone
that's
over
all
this.
the keywords.
We know how they'll spin it. If we leave peacefully, even if we say we're peaceful and we have a great press conference like we had, the U.S. government will spin it in the media saying these are right-wing, horrible terrorists, insurrectionists, and they voted to secede, and because of Texas v. White or some BS, it's it's insurrection and rebellion, and like Laura Deshay said, it's rebellion and violence, even though it's not.
Exactly.
And they'll spin us as terrorists. We know that.
You could do it in yoga pants, burning incense,
but
and they'll call you
and they can say
dangerous.
we're right-wing armed militia terrorists, but still, I don't think, and you haven't proven or convinced me, that 100% of people, or even a big majority in the United States, would support killing us for that. They might say, yeah, they're racist, right-wing, libertarian, free staters, but let them leave. Don't murder them all, because there will be collateral damage. They have kids, they have neighbors, and they themselves are just different than us, not necessarily evil enough to warrant killing everyone in the state. Again, now as far as an actual military war, because you asked me, they can either bomb us and kill everyone in New Hampshire and kill, the 30% who didn't vote for it, like progressives who love Biden.
Seems
and
like a really bad PR
Massachusetts people. It will be the worst PR move ever done by government in history. But or they can go door to door with soldiers and try to kill every single one of the 1.4 million people in the state, which, considering that most of us have ARs, literally will not be successful.
That's going to be tough for them to do.
So let me back this up, right? Everything is progressive. On day one of the war that we were discussing earlier, the strikes were airports and military facilities. On day two, it extended. On day three, it extended. When we went to Iraq, it was like, we're going to kill this one guy. Then we're going to blow up his house. Then we're going to blow up the village. Then we're going to send 700,000 troops and carpet bomb every inch of the country.
But a key difference is going to, and I think you touched on this, Alu, is that those are other parts of the world.
Yes.
And while we all might agree they're human beings and they all should be treated the same as human beings, we can empathize with them. A lot of the people in the United States look at them as foreigners, right?
Yeah, most people are more nationalist.
But they're not going to look at the people of New Hampshire in the same way. And so they may even have a difficult time finding enough soldiers who are willing to kill their own country.
No worries.
I hope.
When we come back, I have an answer for you.
All right, good. We'll get into it coming up here. The number I suspect there are soldiers who absolutely would do exactly what they were told, but what portion of them are they? The number is 603-283-6160. You can join us here. This is Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
After a devastating war, the alien visitors were driven back, and their willing human collaborators were left behind to face the music. When Emma Jean Anderson's ex-lover springs her from prison, Nathan Foster and his 14-year-old nephew Ben are tasked with bringing the pair to justice. An easy enough job until they discover something is inside Emma Jean, and the fate of the planet hangs in the balance. The Family Business by Mike Coopery from BaneBooks.com.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to mymagicmud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. mymagicmud.com, FTL20. Are you tired of governments around the world killing innocent people?
Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin is money that cannot be inflated or controlled by any state. By continuing to use their money, you're perpetuating the killing. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available to you now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. It's Bitcoin.com.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project early movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open here, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. It's Ian Laser and Alu in the studio here tonight. We're talking about independence and what would happen this time around. Because last time around, things got pretty ugly. There's no doubt about it. In fact, that's one of the major objections when you bring up independence. When you bring up secession, one of the major objections from average people is, well, didn't they decide that in the Civil War, or as you put it, Lincoln's War?
It's Lincoln's War.
So a lot of people believe this is a done deal. You cannot leave. It's a perpetual union, blah, 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 whether it's, some court thing that they rely on or whether it's the war of northern aggression or whatever it is they rely on. They figure this is a closed case. It's done. They know the federal government's going to get violent. And I think that's probably the best argument on your side, Laser, and your side of this is you support independence, but you expect it's not going to go smoothly. It's going to be pretty ugly. It's going to get violent on the part of the government gang. And I think that because people believe that to be true, it is likely to happen from that perspective, unless we can change people's minds about it, because to some extent what we believe becomes reality. And so I think if we can get people to believe that peaceful independence is possible, then we get closer to it becoming a reality. But you are pretty negative about this, Laser. You really do believe that the federal government gang doesn't care how they look. They don't care how violent and how depraved and how just terrifying that they are. They will kill their own countrymen, the soldiers. This is the question I was asking before we went away there. What percentage of the military is actually willing to invade New Hampshire and start executing or kidnapping the peaceful secession activists here?
So I'm going to make several points. One, before we all go back to this debate, I want to point out something that I think we can all agree on, which is the contention that this is a perpetual union, which was Lincoln's claim and his justification ultimately for the war, is there is simply no way inherently that there's any truth to this, because by definition, any contract signed by two or more parties is no longer valid if one party violates the terms of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And the Constitution is the contract by which the United States of America was founded. There is no question about this. It is a contractual document. It required ratification by 13 parties. Ultimately, it did not require 13 to go into effect. It required a supermajority. But ultimately, 13 states ratified this contract. This is a contract. The federal government has responsibilities. Beyond responsibilities, it then has rights. And beyond rights, it then has things it is explicitly forbidden from doing, such as violating anything laid out in the original 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, without which the Constitution would never have passed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge, huge deal breaker for numerous states. It's the entire reason the Federalist Papers exist, written by Hamilton and Madison, because a lot of states were like, hey, we just left a giant union and we didn't like it so much, and that's why we all risked our lives and killed a bunch of dudes, and now we're free. We appreciate your help. We can be great neighbors. We're off. And then there was the push for a new United States. And without the Bill of Rights, it never would have happened. The Bill of Rights is not a Bill of Privileges. A Bill of Rights is simply a list of things that everyone foresaw the federal government eventually violating. And so they then saw fit to not only not include it as a right that the federal government has in the Constitution prior to the Bill of Rights, but they felt the need to explicitly enumerate that the federal government can never, ever step on these rights.
And they did.
Of course they did. Every single one of them.
Millions of times.
Every single one of them.
Right.
Not a single one of them still exists. But that's the whole purpose of it. It's not privileges. These are inherent rights.
That's right.
And so,
they weren't granted to you by the document.
Right. As they consider it per the Declaration, these were rights granted by the Creator, whatever the exact
You have them
verbiage.
because you're a human being.
Exactly. Yeah. By virtue of existing, these are rights. And of course, they don't exist. Now, as I understand contracts, and I'm no contract attorney, but as I understand contracts, if you and I sign a contract right now and you violate every single clause in the contract, either the contract is inherently void or I take you to court and not only is the contract void, but you're going to pay damages. Mm-hmm. We have a contract. 13 states initially, and then others, and the federal government, which is inherently intended to exist outside of the states as a third party, have a contract. It's called the United States Constitution. It's been violated approximately 8 million, billion, trillion times every day by virtue of the existence of most federal laws. This is violated.
Sure.
And even furthermore, as far as the contract, it even goes a step further. It's not like I signed the contract between me and Uncle Sam and they violated it. Theoretically, the best argument says, well, your theoretical great-great-grandfather 240 years ago, he or a delegate acting on his behalf immorally, somewhat representing him in theory, signed it.
Yeah, well, how can they bind their successors?
And so that, I just wanted to get that out of the way, and I think we all agree on that. The argument piece of this is a perpetual contract is simply BS. There is no such thing as a perpetual contract, because if a contract is violated, it ends.
Well, yeah, and we've addressed this in the discussions that we've had here in New Hampshire in front of the State House, where there's this character, Brody DeShays, who is sort of the tool that the state has been using to defend itself, and he brings up all these ridiculous objections. And, of course, I think you pointed this out, Alu, or somebody did at one point, but you look at their own so-called contract, you look at the Constitution, and it does not prohibit leaving. There's nothing in there. Was it Article 1, Section 10, I think?
I think so. Daniel Miller, I think, reminded me of that. Yeah, it literally lists the things the states can't do. It says the states shall not coin their own money. The states shall not enter into a contract or whatever, and no state can be admitted into the union without Congress.
Right.
It does not say states are barred from leaving. And the founders, who literally just seceded a few years prior, knew very well what secession was. They knew about the concept. If they wanted it prohibited, they would have prohibited it in the Constitution.
Any club is going to have rules for you to get in, but you can always leave if you don't like the way the club's going.
Of course, unless you're an MS-13. But
yeah.
So look, ultimately, Thomas Jefferson, widely considered the father of this country. Thomas Jefferson, in 2 separate letters, very explicitly, and on numerous other occasions, slightly more implicitly, clearly stated. One was after the War of 1812, and one was regarding the Louisiana Purchase, if I recall correctly. But he clearly stated, hey, a lot of states are disagreeing on a lot of things. I would rather see this entire project fall apart and everyone just go their separate ways than see the inevitable bloodshed if we continue down this road. He called it.
So he prophesized what Lincoln would do in the decision he made.
Because he knew it, because he built it, because he studied it, he lived it, he knew this, and he saw it coming and said, I would rather see this, right? This was an experiment, cool experiment, never quite been done before to this extent, and he fathered it. He designed it, ultimately, more than any other individual. There were other people, but he designed it more than any other one person. And he said he would rather see the whole thing fall apart than see it end with everyone killing each other.
So you want to hear something creepy that the Shade said that I only noticed how creepy it was when I was watching the video? He, like we obviously compare New Hampshire and the federal government to, spouses and the federal government abusing us. What he said was, well, it took two parties. It took the federal government as well as New Hampshire to agree to let us in. Therefore, it takes both of us to consent to us leaving.
That's terrifying. So if you get married and then one of you beats the other with a tabletop...
My wife can't leave me unless we both agree she can leave. So if she wants to leave...
Perpetual.
He literally said there's no unilateral separation. That's not a thing. It took two to enter. It takes both consenting to leave.
I'm just saying,
Very creepy.
I hope he's not a married man.
Maybe, I was just saying, maybe women won't date him after they hear that he's very, very sick.
The number is 603-283-6160. But still, and I want to come back to this question, what do you think... as far as percentage of U.S. military, like you've been around some military people in your work, what percentage of them would go ahead and follow the order to start killing people in New Hampshire?
When we come back.
There's more coming up.
Carl Watner, longtime proponent of a voluntary society, died last December. You may have seen his articles published on his website, voluntarist.com, in his newsletter, The Voluntarist, the Mises Institute, or elsewhere over the last 40 years. His newest book, I Must Speak Out, Volume 2, The Best of the Voluntarist, is now available via Liberty Under Attack Publications. This 430-page second volume spans the years of 2000 through 2020 and includes articles by Carl Watner, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Carl Hess, Benjamin Tucker, George H. Smith, Lysander Spooner, Pete Eyre, Joyce Brand, and many others. I Must Speak Out is for the newly initiated, the veteran voluntarist, or anywhere in between. Buy the book now at libertyunderattack.com/voluntarist. For more great content on building a voluntary society and for Carl's extensive archives, check out voluntarist.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. U.S. President Joe Biden says he supports the idea of expelling Russia from the G20 as punishment for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The president has attended meetings in Brussels with Nato and the G20, during which he announced new American sanctions against Russia and a plan to allow 100,000 refugees into the U.S. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
At a press conference in Brussels, the US president said that it would be up to the G20 to decide if Russia should be removed, but that he supported that decision. He also said that if the G20 couldn't agree, then Ukraine should be allowed to attend meetings as an observer. And he warned that the US stood ready to act if Russia used chemical weapons in Ukraine.
We would respond. We would respond if he uses it. The nature of the response would depend on the nature of the use.
And he also said that President Putin had been banking on NATO being split, wildly underestimating the Western military alliance's response, adding that NATO was more united today than it had ever been before. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Heavy fighting continues across Ukraine, including in the capital Kyiv and the besieged port city of Mariupol in the south. European Union officials have agreed on a landmark deal designed to rein in the power of the world's biggest tech firms. Officials in Brussels worked late into the evening, putting the finishing touches on the Digital Markets Act, which has been in the works for more than a year. This is directed squarely at large firms such as Meta, Amazon, and Apple, as it applies to what the EU calls gatekeeper platforms, with a market capitalization of at least 75 billion euros, or turnover in the European Economic Area of at least 7.5 billion euros. The law includes a raft of measures, such as restrictions on combining personal data from different sources and mandating companies to allow users to install apps from third-party platforms. The Digital Markets Act now has to be approved by a vote in the EU Parliament, where it's expected to pass. It would go into effect next year. U.S. markets rallied on Thursday after new figures showed a drop in unemployment claims. But trading remains volatile as the conflict in Ukraine continues. FSN's Sarah Walton reports from New York.
Wall Street recouped much of the losses made on Wednesday, with the Dow gaining 350 points, or 1%. The S&P was up 1.4%, and the Nasdaq gained 1.9%. Microchip makers were the big winners, with Intel climbing nearly 7%. Nvidia was up 10%. There was also a 4% increase for Bitcoin. It comes as new figures from the Labour Department showed jobless claims dropped to 187,000 last week. That's the lowest level since 1969.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, phones open if you want to join in here. The number is 603-283-6160. Can independence happen? Can peaceful secession be a real thing in the United States, or anywhere in the world for that matter? Arguably, Brexit is a great example of this, but I know you, Laser, you've got an objection to that. We can talk about that. But I did ask a question first here. It's Ian, Laser, and Alu in the studio tonight. And Laser, you aren't in the military, but you've worked closely with militaries. You're a contractor. You're a diplomat, and so you've spent a lot of time with these guys.
I spent a lot of time around military from various countries. Yeah.
And of the United States military people that you've spent time around, and you've probably not explicitly asked them this question, though if you have, that'd be great. How many of them do you think would go ahead and follow the order to invade New Hampshire, occupy the streets, possibly round people up, black bag them, take them to rendition camps, possibly, set people's houses on fire? Like, what? How many of them would go ahead and just do that?
So not directly regarding New Hampshire, but I have flatly asked some of my friends this question.
Okay.
If it came down to it, would they go in? Now, there are people
Would they go into some state that has seceded?
Anywhere.
Was the question?
Would they simply, the way I posed the question was, if it came up, would you bear arms against fellow Americans?
Okay.
My personal friends wouldn't, because they're the kind of people who are my friends. If they were the kind of people who would, they probably wouldn't not be
your
my friends.
Fair enough.
So there's that. And I did ask one so far as, hey, what do you think your whole unit would do? So this particular friend, his quick background, he was a civilian paramedic. He became a helicopter paramedic. He went and joined the Marine Corps. He became a Marine recon sniper. He went to re-enlist and said, I want to be an officer. They said, we got nothing for you, but how do you feel about flying? And he goes, will that make me an officer? And they said, if you go to the Army, it'll make you a warrant officer. So he's currently a Black Hawk pilot. So he's, as he put it, he can shoot them, fix them, and fly them out all by himself.
Okay.
He's an interesting guy. He said he's also a Kentucky boy. Like, this is a backwoods, homegrown boy from the holler who's as red-blooded American as you can be. He said the unit, the guys he works with, he said none of them would do it.
Okay.
But he's also, again, this is a guy coming out of Kentucky, and the guys he's working with are Kentucky, Tennessee. These are guys in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I don't think there's anything in the world that can make those boys shoot another person.
And I spoke to a former Marine on Wednesday. So was it yesterday? Yeah. I spoke to someone in New Hampshire who was in the U.S. Marines, so served with people from all over the United States. And he said he thinks nobody in the military would do it. He said if we seceded and the United States government deployed men with guns to go kill us, it would be National Guards and not military. I don't know why he said that. That's what he said. He said National Guards wouldn't do it, except maybe like California would comply. He said the most likely to comply, to be ordered to do it and to comply with it would be federal three-letter agency goons. He said they
so
might
like the Federal Protective Service or
FBI. Yeah, he said they might comply with it, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And they have, not
but
a ton,
a lot
but
of those guys are former military too.
That too.
Yeah. So here's my problem with that contention is, for starters, we've already seen this happen in the United States. If you think of just the last couple of years in Minnesota, and I have videos that I can show you.
I trust you.
Convoys of armored vehicles rolling down the street. National Guard vehicles. We're talking Humvees. We're talking armored personnel
Yeah, but you're
carriers.
talking about during riots.
Yes. However, this is an example of a governor calling in the National Guard who are firing rubber bullets into people's homes because they have the door open and they're filming.
Yeah, no, that's terrifying. And another example, of course, Watertown, Massachusetts, after the Boston bombing, where they literally had police in camouflage with armored personnel carriers pointing guns at people's windows, not because they were in any kind of danger, just because they can.
Just because.
And so there's definitely some scary, insane police state stuff going on out there. But none of those things were done under the auspices of, oh, we're going to invade another state. It was all done under the auspices of fear. And if indeed this movement stays as peaceful as I think Alu and I and everybody that's involved intends it to be, then they can't make the same excuses.
Yeah, you still haven't proven that the people of the United States would support the U.S. government killing all of us. Because again, they don't want to lose the election. I know it's a quick thing and it can happen in a few days, but still, they're thinking there's an election in a few months. There's always an election in a few months or a year. So they're thinking if they do this and it's very unpopular, I know they don't care if it's unpopular. Congress has an approval rating below cockroaches. I know, it's 9%, but they're unpopular. That being said, how violently angry are the people? Right now, people are angry about certain things and taxes, but if they are killing people in New Hampshire, which again are their cousins and their friends, and they're so unpopular, everyone in Congress is removed, they don't want that to be removed next November.
I think they don't want it right now. I think with a little bit of steering, I can not only get them wanting it, but I can get them begging for it. I could do that myself. I don't think it's that difficult. So one, it's all about labeling and propaganda, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, you're peaceful guys who just want to leave. But if I spend 6 months pounding the narrative through every single possible media outlet that you're armed, dangerous, right-wing extremist, domestic terrorists...
I admit they'll do that. We all know they will.
They've been saying that about New Hampshire for a long time.
Right. And by the way, as far as crying wolf, they've been saying that we're armed, crazy, demented, right-wing nationalist bigots forever. Do you think the word racist, bigot, violent is kind of losing its steam maybe over the last few decades?
I would say so, right up until the point of secession, at which point they can go, see, everything we've claimed is true. Yeah. Everything we've claimed is true.
But that said, a lot of people, I think one of you touched on this, although I think it was you, that a lot of people, when they're presented with the question of should California be able to secede, certainly people on the right say, hell yeah, get out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're in support of their political enemies leaving. So similarly, there would be a lot of people, the people that see New Hampshire as this right-wing place, which it isn't. New Hampshire's a purple state. New Hampshire's very independent. The plurality of voters here are actually independent. They're not registered as Democrats or Republicans, but regardless, people perceive what they perceive. So the people perceive us as these right-wing crazies are going to say, yeah, get them out of here. We don't need their senators or whatever, even though they're on the left. They're going to say, get out of here. And I think that ultimately, if you look at the surveys that have been done, there's actually some really interesting numbers out there from just within the last couple of years. I don't remember the name of who did this survey, but they asked a question all around the United States, and they asked, essentially the question was, and I'm paraphrasing, would you support your state seceding from the United States and joining a union of the surrounding states? So, like, there was the New England secession, and then there's like the Southwest, and then Pacific Northwest, and so these sort of areas of the country. And a shocking number of people. Like, I was surprised by how many people supported that particular question. Obviously, it's not a pure secession question as far as, should a state be free to leave and go its own way, but it was a question about secession. In the South, there was obviously a large number of Republicans, like 60% or something like that supported the question. But even in New England, there were actually a lot of Democrats that supported this question. And it was around, I think, 34% on average in New England, if I recall correctly, supported that question. And then, of course, you've got the whole, since then, there's been this whole national divorce thing, which has been trending, where even people on both the left and the right have been supporting this. I feel like the times have changed on this issue, or they're starting to change. And don't you think that the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times, what people think is going to play into whether or not the government goes full-on hardcore and starts killing people?
So, again, like I was saying earlier to Olu, I think that this is a stepped approach. In terms of the government, if you say we're independent, their first step will not be bomb you. Mm-hmm. Their first step will be, oh, you want to be independent? Nobody in, nobody out, unless they swear fealty. Their second step will be, oh, if anybody goes out, we hold them forever. Their third step will be take out the head of Medusa. Mm-hmm. Their fourth step will be take out more people. There are a lot of steps before bomb them all. I still fully think that if it comes to it, they will bomb them all. But there are a lot of steps before that will begin to make people question, is this worth it? Oh, my neighbor disappeared yesterday. Oh, my cousin disappeared yesterday. Oh, suddenly at every gas station I go to, there's an FBI car. At some point, the question is, are people willing to keep going down this road, or do they begin to be too frightened?
The number is 603-283-6160, and that is an important question. I mean, if people aren't willing to take this chance and to go down this sort of unbeaten path and see what happens, then it'll never play out. So we do need some brave people who are willing to take a risk. There's more coming up here. You can join us in the remaining moments of Free Talk Live coming up.
Because we are smothering in spam, please do not reply to all when you can instead reply. I was recently among over 100 invited to a corporate reunion. It's always a warm affair, and that's the problem. Enthusiasm for our upcoming get-together caused many recipients to RSVP the organizer with a cheery reply to all. I can't wait. Then others piled on with a reply to all to that. Then the "I'm out of my office now" autoresponders joined in. So I replied to all, asking that we all reply only to the organizer. Hey, at least I tried. One invitee, apparently retired, shot back, "Point taken, but I really like seeing the responses since they're so positive." Smiley face. This better be an open bar. From survivalspeech.com, I'm Holland Cook.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
Free Talk Live.
The town wants him to stop. So he's charged with a misdemeanor and could spend 6 months in jail. 71 years old.
Nice folks there.
He's
wouldn't let
blind. That's his source of
blind
living.
old man sell some firewood out of his front yard. Nice.
So now you're looking at having to go out, get a firewood permit, which is going to cost you X amount of dollars a year, and who knows how much research to try and figure out how to get the permit.
Just doing whatever they can to stop industry.
Yeah, then you have to go and get your education so you can actually run the saw, and then you have to get a variance on your property so you can actually sell the firewood from your property. Oh, and don't forget, if you have a storefront, then you have to pay, what, $500, $600, $700 a month in rent, maybe $4,000 a month in rent, depending on what city you live in.
Gotta have an occupational license, too.
Aggression like this by these government people happens all across the country, and you have to ask, how much more are you willing to put up with before you finally say no?
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and moments remain here. This show has flown by for me. You guys have been great. Thanks for coming all the way out here from the Manchester area.
Yeah.
Check them out at libertyblock.com. It's Laser and Alu joining me tonight. And I'm Ian. The number is 603-283-6160. You can join us online, by the way. We do have our social media platform. You can go to social.freetalklive.com. Alu, you've got an account on there, I think. You're somewhere on Mastodon, right?
Yep.
Check it out because it is free, number one, and number two, it's not run by some big tech media corporation. It's actually run by us. We're running it on our server. It's Mastodon. That means it's open source. That means it's federated with other Mastodon. So if you know other people on other Mastodon servers, and there are thousands of them, you can follow them and they can follow you, and you don't have to be on the same server. It's pretty sweet. Social.freetalklive.com. Also, do want to say thanks to JCOM3030, who is a diamond level supporter of the Free Talk Live AMP Patreon. You can join us over at amps.freetalklive.com. AMPS actually stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. It's a way for you to help us get the ideas of liberty, independence on more radio stations around the country. We're on over 190 great stations that air this show at various different times throughout the week. We could be on 250, 300. It's possible, but it does take money. It does take time and effort, and your AMP dollars can help us with that. amps.freetalklive.com. You can go over there and sign up like JCOM3030. Now, JCOM did Diamond level, which is completely amazing, but all we ask for is $5 a month. So please help us out. We certainly appreciate you over at amps.freetalklive.com. Let's go to Bob. He's in West Virginia listening, I think, to WVTS there in Charleston. Bob, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Very good. Yes, before hostilities commenced at Fort Sumter, it was accepted that the Declaration of Independence, along with the Constitution, were part and parcel to the organic law of the land, where in the Declaration of Independence, we are given the franchise to separate from whatever government does not that we disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
And what changed all of that was when in South Carolina, the attack on Fort Sumter was basically an attack on the federal United States, and it was an act of war. You see, they allowed for the creation of the Confederate States, all the way down to the president being selected, the vice president, and all of the officers of the Confederate States of America were created. And there was no action against the Confederate States until they attacked Fort Sumter, which was an act of war because Fort Sumter technically is not a part of South Carolina.
Well, hold on a second.
Well, if there was a blockade, that was an act of war.
Yeah, I was going to say, Laser, you were giving us the history earlier.
So I'll field this for you, Bob. Fort Sumter, if you were to divide the United States into the colonies, Fort Sumter is unquestionably in South Carolinian waters because it's swimmable.
Well, that's not what Abraham Lincoln said.
Right. Well, no, he was a liar. You're 100% correct.
Abraham Lincoln said, Fort Sumter is part and parcel to the federal United States. This is an act of war.
Absolutely.
Right, but what came before that? But there was something that came before that, and that was the Lincoln was cutting them off, right?
So you are correct, Bob. You are 100% correct, unequivocally. That is what Lincoln said. If you were to look at
before that, we had a perfect right and perfect obligation to separate from the federal United States if we so chose to do.
All right, but I want Laser to be able to answer
that was a right
this.
in the organic law of the land, which included the Declaration of Independence. That was accepted as settled law.
Bob, I want to give Laser a chance to respond to what you've brought up so far. Can you go ahead, Laser?
So I'll feel that, Bob. I love this. I appreciate you bringing this up. As what I like to think, I'm the resident scholar on this particular war and the development of it. If you go back far enough, the very first movement to separate from the United States was actually in the War of 1812, and it was actually based in New England. And it involved 5 states who said, hey, we're not really into this war. We're going to leave. And that almost led to the very first secession. You then later in the late 1820s have the beginning of what became known as the Tariff of Abominations, which almost led to the secession of numerous southern states, again based around South Carolina. This eventually
South
ended
Carolina, 1827.
Exactly. And then you have the nullification crisis, and then you have some degree of resolution in 1832. So this was building for a very, very long time. Now, if you were to look at it geographically, if you recognize South Carolina as an independent nation or an independent state within a different confederation of states, Fort Sumter is unquestionably a piece of South Carolinian land because of the sheer proximity to mainland South Carolina versus mainland anywhere else. So what essentially happened early on there is South Carolina said, we have seceded, right? They vote, they passed. I've been down to the museum in Greenville where they actually have the document of secession from South Carolina. They have one of the original copies, which was interesting to see. Now, South Carolina secedes, and they say, hey, we have now left, and Sumter, that little tiny island, that's part of our land, so you're going to need to leave that too. And Lincoln says, absolutely not. As you said, Lincoln says, this is part and parcel part of the Union. We're not leaving. South Carolina says, well, I mean, I can jump from where I'm standing onto Fort Sumter. This is a piece of South Carolina, and you need to leave. Lincoln's response was to blockade all of the harbors and ports of South Carolina, not allowing any trade in or out, which has for centuries,
That's an act of war.
For centuries, this has been recognized as an act of war, because if you strangle the economy, and the economy of the South, especially once it became hostile between the South and the North, the economy of the South was entirely agricultural, and it was textile-based, primarily cotton, and this was trade with several European nations. And without that, the South was going to die. And Lincoln knew that. So Lincoln knew that he didn't have to fire the first shot. I hate the man, but he was very smart. He knew that he doesn't have to fire the first shot. He simply has to put South Carolina in a position wherein either they die or they fire the first shot. So he choked the ports and he choked the harbors. And eventually he pushed South Carolina into either we all starve to death because we have no trade, because the North will no longer trade with us, and we don't want to trade with the North. And every time we try to push a boat out to sea full of cotton to go trade with France, we're turned back by Union naval ships. And so eventually their only choice was to remove the naval blockade and remove Sumter so they could open the Atlantic Ocean or simply die. So they fired the first shot.
When they killed off the perfect right and obligation to separate was by that war itself. That actually softened the reality of what was in the Declaration of Independence.
Well, if you're implying that might makes right and wars decide morality or the law, then I think I would disagree there.
Well, yeah, I don't think they killed off anything. They certainly made a statement, and it scared a lot of people. But if you get enough people who are ready to do this and ready to do it peacefully, I think it's an idea that's time has come again. Bob, what do you think?
I think that you shouldn't attack any federal reservation in New Hampshire.
Good plan. Thanks for the call tonight, Bob. I definitely appreciate it.
Good idea.
But that is a tough issue because and it's something again. I've gotten every question at this point. I've gotten thousands of questions. Right now, there is in every state, including New Hampshire, there are federal lands. We have some federal bases. Yeah, the whole middle of New Hampshire is the White Mountain National Forest. That's a national forest. Thanks, Teddy Roosevelt. And that's a lot of land. And also, I think someone mentioned the Pease Air Force Base is federal, shared with the National Guard because right now they're the same military. So that's also somewhat federal. So they mentioned that would be an issue. And again, I think I addressed this in Articles of Secession. I wrote a little booklet mostly for the state reps. Let me see if I have some cards here. I have cards somewhere. And the
We've
cover of the
cards.
Articles of Secession, the book cover. So I wrote when the legislators like Baldessar and a few other state reps in that hearing said, you guys just want secession, you don't have a plan. I said, we do have a plan. I've written about this in Blueprint for Liberty and other books and articles and podcasts. But you know what? Al, because I like you and because you were the first state rep to endorse me in my primary and you always supported me, I'll write a book for you. So I dedicated the whole book to him. And then a few days later, I gave him on the voting day, on March 10th, I gave him a signed copy, personalized thinking, Al. So I don't think you read it. No. But I wrote a whole booklet answering all those common questions. One of them is what happens to our military, their military, and shared military installations. And another part of the book, I think I addressed the national land, and it's complicated. And pretty much we would have negotiations like any divorce. But divorce is complicated. Yes, no one's saying it's not. Yet divorce still happens, right? Like 50% of marriages end in divorce nowadays. So yes, there would be some negotiations and things would happen. And either, we would keep all the land and we would give them a few million of their FRNs, a few $1 million, and we would keep the land, or we would let them have some rights to, share the Air Force base on Pease, which is kind of on the border anyway.
They could pay us.
Yeah, or they could pay us to use it. So there will be some deals. Again, people think we're dumb cowboys with no plan, or we haven't thought about this. There are going to be deals made, and it's complicated, but we're going to make deals and figure it out.
So I want to give Bob some credit real quick if I can. Bob is right that you should not attack federal lands. My qualm with that is that the feds have claimed a whole lot of lands, so you have no choice eventually but to step on them, or they will step on you.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the negotiation can come into play.
And if you want to hear more of this kind of debate, check out Liberty Block's podcast as well on any podcast catcher.
We're here all the time.
Absolutely. And that's at libertyblock.com. Check them out. We'll see you tomorrow night. Online in the meantime, freetalklive.com. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition